Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was serious from his young age and focus on his training part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Asuma knew the answer before he'd asked the question. It was there, right in front of him, in front of all of them, stretching then crinkling his father's face, even forcing Kakashi to abandon his aloof detachment in favor of stark attention. His body looked like it was being propped up with a stiff rod. Asuma looked at the man's one exposed eye, tired. That's the only word he could come up with, and what a brutal beating his fortitude had taken. One swift and terrible motion and Asuma shook his head, his hand moving to rub the short bristles on his chin. He wanted a cigarette. He wanted smoke and the dry, thin smell of burning tobacco to fill the room. He'd be relaxed then, but that wasn't what he needed now. Maybe if they hadn't been relaxed, things would have turned out differently. He couldn't help but smile, his teeth showing. And maybe the sun would rise in the west tomorrow morning, and he'd be named the next Hokage. His eyes widened as they shifted to his father. This would mean he swallowed. Cigarettes would definitely have to wait. Minato Namikaze is dead. His father's voice, low and rough, like gravel under a wheel, carried the rhetorical statement. Asuma lowered his head, his eyes narrowing. The intent there wasn't anything hostile, but he could feel the energy in the room shift, like the tightening of a cord. A noose. Around Konoha and all of them. He rubbed his chin again, his fingers moving to drum along the line of his jaw. He didn't even want to look at anyone anymore. It wouldn't do anything. Minato is gone. The Yellow Flash. The Yondaime. The hero of the Third Shinobi War. The most gifted ninja of the last 2 generations. His train of thought stopped, as though moving to more solid footing. The most brilliant teacher he'd ever had, if it had only been for days at a time. And the Kyuubi? Yudate asked. Quiet and straight to the point. Again, chakras flared, the edge of a blade getting too close to his skin, cold and sharp. He shook his head again. It wasn't worth the effort at this point. Gone. Hiruzen spoke with the same tone. He sighed and leaned back, seeming to collapse rather than relax. Sealed away. The room went still as Asuma raised his head. A Jinchuriki. Fugaku Uchiha muttered. He must have still been coming to terms with the night's events to simply state an obvious fact. Who is it? Danzo this time. Asuma had always danced between indifference and suspicion where the man was concerned, his every curiosity and suggestion giving him pause. He looked at him for a moment, until another voice drew him away. His son. Naruto. Jiraiya's brow was creased, his arms folded in front of his chest, and his eyes they were elsewhere, looking to the floor but narrowed in concentration and frustration. Asuma made the decision to ask him about what had transpired later on. Minato, he named him before he fell? Kakashi's voice carried an almost childlike incomprehension. He didn't fall. He sacrificed himself. He used the Shinigami to seal Kyuubi within Naruto, and as payment, had to offer his soul. A forbidden jutsu. Mitokado seemed almost to hesitate. Jiraiya's head snapped up, his intent turning deadly, but it was Danzo who intervened. It was a necessary decision. Nothing that any of us would have been able to avoid, had we been in the same position. He exhaled slowly, seeming to compress himself. The burden of that office is not something that lesser men can shoulder. It's nothing short of a protracted sacrifice. Asuma's lips parted in a puff of air. And there Danzo went, either numbing him into an accepting indifference, nor salting the already deep wounds everyone in the room carried. Did the man even invest himself in individuals anymore? Mitokado cleared his throat. Be that as it may, it still leaves us with 2 very serious problems. We have no Hokage, and the Jinchuriki has no familial connections. Naruto, Jiraiya ground out. His name is Naruto. Both Mitokado and Yudate glanced at him as though he were speaking gibberish. Enough. His father spoke again, his forehead resting against the hand of his upright arm. He looks so much more tired. Orochimaru and now this. If he had just killed him, he's already accepted what's going to happen. Asuma looked around again. All of them had to know too. It was just a matter of formalities and technicalities now. He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. He really wanted a cigarette. But who in the village could replace Minato? His father sighed. No one. There isn't anyone in Konoha who is as capable a shinobi as Minato was. To have subdued the Kyuubi while circumventing the destruction of the village. What about you, Jiraiya? Kakashi spoke for the first time. You were Minato's teacher. If anyone could come close. No. The sentiment had multiple voices, and Asuma would have sworn Jiraiya joined the chorus. Still, no one could deny the Toad Sannin's power and knowledge. Jiraiya plowed ahead with his own deprecation. I'm not fit for administrative duties. I work better alone, and don't have the patience to deal with politics and balancing conflicting interests. He gave the counselors a meaningful look, which neither of them failed to notice. Minato was only Hokage for a few years before his death. There hasn't had enough time for the new generation to find its proper footing yet. His father breathed out, seeming to be pained. Asuma almost winced. It seems that we'll have to step back onto well-trodden ground. Another silence, though Asuma had no idea why. The suggestion of Jiraiya seemed almost a gross attempt at humor in the face of an obvious answer. Interests again. He couldn't blame the man for not wanting the job. Again, Hiruzen? Danzo's voice was quiet, carrying the same quality of detachment and nostalgia that Jiraiya's had when he'd spoken of Minato's last moments. The Hokage looked up, his eyes weary. Is it something you're so eager to volunteer for, Shimura? He smiled, small and placid. Even now? Danzo remained silent for a few moments. When he spoke, his voice was like the crinkling of dry paper. I've always played my part, even if out of sight. Mitokado looked at him curiously. What are you two going on about? Danzo straightened. Nothing. Just chasing old memories. He looked to the others in the room. It seems we've been placed in a dangerous situation. We have a new Jinchuriki, and no suitable replacement for the Hokage from the new generation. If Konoha is to maintain its credibility and maintain its security in the coming years, we need to install someone who has not only the necessary strength, but also the experience of a seasoned shinobi. He paused then, his eyes roaming the room. Barring my own entrance into the position, I see no other candidate except for Sarutobi Hiruzen. Asuma exhaled, imagining the smoke that would have formed had he just taken a drag on a fresh cigarette. The counselors seemed placated, nodding slowly, though their eyes lingered on Danzo longer than Asuma would have expected. They wouldn't have seriously considered him, would they? Neither Fugaku Uchiha nor Hayashi Hyuga let their emotions show, seeming to simply accept the return of an established quantity. Asuma caught his father's eye, and as before, he could surmise the man's condition with one word: exhaustion. Kakashi would recover, as would every other young shinobi in the room. They might have lost a sensei, a friend, a leader, an inspiration, and for one flickering instant, hope. But they'd all recover. A night of sleep would replenish their stamina, and in the coming weeks and months, their spirit would return as well, and along with it, their pride. Just like regaining breath after being punched in the gut. But his father, Sarutobi Hiruzen, he'd been worn down slowly and steadily, a continuous decline accelerated by constant physical and mental exertion that had only been compounded by 3 wars and the betrayal of his most prized student. I thought of him as a son. Asuma's fist tightened again. No. He'd gotten over that. Just petty reactions. His father didn't think like that anymore. Jiraiya broke his ministrations. That still leaves Naruto. As far as we know, he has no surviving family as of this point, and we have no way of knowing what kind of potential he might have as a shinobi. Mitokado interrupted. You're not seriously considering training him as such, are you? Jiraiya's eyes narrowed, his chakra flaring. And why not? If that's his wish when he matures, I see no reason to stop him from pursuing his ambitions. Yuditane sighed and shook her head. It's all well and good to talk about how we should treat him like an ordinary shinobi, but we have to face the facts. The Kyuubi attacked the village and killed the Hokage, along with a substantial number of other shinobi. Do you honestly believe it's wise to allow him free rein amongst the children at the academy? Jiraiya was silent, apparently speechless from shock and anger. Asuma's eyes narrowed, and Kakashi had stiffened. More politics again, is it? He's not something that you can just lock in a cage and only take out to make sure that he isn't quite on the verge of starvation. Minato and Kushina gave their lives to protect this village, and if you think that I'm going to sit back and allow you to treat their son like a rabid dog, you're very badly mistaken. He fixed them both with a wave of killer intent, causing Hiruzen to rise from his chair. Jiraiya, his tone held a warning. His student didn't seem to hear him. I'm going to make this very clear to both of you. Naruto is going to be allowed to attend the academy. He's going to be allowed to interact normally with the other children, and he's going to be treated like any other shinobi of the village, and if either of you try to interfere with him in any way, I'll kill you. Mitokado and Yuditane could only struggle to contain their anger. Asuma couldn't help but smile a bit, even as he shook his head. It was a pretty speech, but like many his father had made before, he doubted that it would come to any kind of physical fruition. Minato's son, being argued over like that, with barely even a mention of his name. He sighed. Naruto. That's enough, Jiraiya. No one is suggesting that Naruto be undermined or mistreated in any way. And he was tired again, deep in thought, split between past and present. Hayashi spoke, low and strained. Anger? Asuma couldn't place it. We don't know if the Kyuubi will be contained again this time. How thoroughly has the seal been examined? My student's abilities in sealing are second to none. Jiraiya paused. Frankly, I'm amazed he was able to execute something so complicated in so short a time while under such duress. I can't know for certain that I would have been able to do it myself. Hayashi nodded, seemingly satisfied, though his eyes narrowed a moment later. Many of my clan members died tonight, and even more were injured. How do we know that the Kyuubi won't find a way to influence its vessel and break free? Worse, it could manipulate him to the point where it could conceal itself in plain sight amongst us and strike when we're at our weakest. That won't happen. Jiraiya spoke with a certainty that seemed to do little to sway those in the room. How do we know that? Uchiha spoke in just as calm a tone. You said yourself that the seal is incredibly complicated and was completed under extreme duress. For all we know, Minato could have made a mistake in his haste that allowed some of the Kyuubi's influence to extend beyond its prison. We have no way of knowing if the child is being influenced, even now. Jiraiya remained silent, his body trembling, Hiruzen's gaze seemingly keeping him from an outburst against the clan heads. I for one would have no objection to allowing the Yandame's son to train at the academy. Danzo had regained his seemingly disinterested tone of voice, and Asuma was again left in the dark as to the man's mindset. With proper training and supervision, he could become a very valuable asset to the village. Jiraiya snorted. Exactly what do proper training and supervision entail? Danzo shrugged. It's foolish to operate under the delusion that the boy is an ordinary person after what happened tonight. His abilities are unknown, even without the addition of the Kyuubi's potential power. He'd have to be monitored extensively for the first few years of his life, his seal inspected at regular intervals to make sure that the demon isn't influencing him, or weakening its prison. If after all that, his mental and physical state is found to be satisfactory, he can be very valuable to the village. If not, we'll have to take measures to ensure that Konoha and those who inhabit it are safe from another potential attack. You keep referring to him as a tool. Is that all he's going to be regarded, as even in the best of circumstances? Kakashi had regained his calm demeanor. All shinobi are tools, after a fashion. Tools for defense, tools for offense. But above all, they're tools for peace and unity, even if in the process they must walk an ugly and bloody path. His speech seemed to give Jiraiya pause, though the man's eyes were narrowed as if he was bringing his own philosophy of shinobi to bear in his mind. Jiraiya. This isn't the time. His father had laced the fingers of both hands together and rested his chin on the construct. He's already back in his role. Now Asuma felt tired. The Hokage straightened, the motion garnering him all the attention in the room. What you have heard about Uzumaki Naruto's circumstances and heritage is not to leave this room. You are not to tell any of your family members, friends, or clan heads, or any other person you may encounter. Any deviation from this ordinance will be punishable by death. Kakashi shook his head. With due respect, Hokage, how are you going to prevent the villagers who witnessed the Kyuubi's assault and sudden disappearance from coming to the conclusion that he was sealed within a person? And this still leaves Naruto's own knowledge of his heritage as an open issue. His surname will be Uzumaki, after his mother. The Hokage sighed again. Minato had many enemies, especially after his participation in the war. Giving him his father's name would be an open invitation to any number of revenge-fueled attempts on his life. And a chance to actually have a heritage and a connection to his father. Asuma couldn't help but feel disappointed by his father's actions. He's like a son to me. He would have been an exceptional Hokage. Asuma rubbed his face. This wouldn't end well. And what will become of the boy while he grows? Allowing him to be taken in by one of the major clans will not sit well the rest. The Hyuga will have no part in development of the Jinchuriki. Hayashi's tone left no room for argument. Nor will Clan Uchiha. I don't intend to hand Naruto over to any of the major clans. He paused and regarded Jiraiya, who had slowly been growing more tense with every exchange. There would be too much discord if any of the clans could lay a claim to a Jinchuriki, especially after Kyuubi's recent attack. Another pause. The best option is to let Naruto grow up with no connection to any of the existing clans. An orphan, in other words. Jiraiya's tone was as disapproving as his expression. Mitokado spoke. What would you suggest, Jiraiya? Would you be willing to take the boy into your custody, and have him with you on your excursions? Which excursions are you referring to? I do a great deal of field work, and it's a broad term, don't you think? Mitokado didn't reply, turning instead to the Hokage. Keeping the Jinchuriki ignorant of his birth and the circumstances of his orphaning might work in the short run, but if he starts formal training, we still have no way of knowing what kind of effect it will have on the demon. Danzo interjected, that situation has already been addressed. Formal training will be allowed once we've ascertained that there is no emergent or lasting influence from QB. It's far more likely that formal training will facilitate a greater degree of control the vessel of the demon. We have little to lose by taking that course of action. Both counselors exchanged looks before signaling their acquiescence through twin nods, their stances relaxing as Jiraiya's and Kakashi's wound like a cable drawn too tightly. Asuma crossed his arms and slouched. Minato would have been a different father. Different than my own. He knew the burden of the office, but he wouldn't have done something like this, not even with he was like a son to me. I have too many enemies. If I took Naruto with me, he would be in danger just by virtue of his association with me, never mind what might happen if his true heritage and circumstances came to light while he was with me. Would I be any different though? Even if I've always told myself I was, after I shrugged off what I told myself was my inheritance. And then what's the better action to take? You refute our ideas and refuse to take up any sort of responsibility for yourself or come up with an alternative. Hokage's ward. The clans won't be appeased. He was like. I'll take him. Asuma raised his voice just high enough to catch his father's and the counselor's attentions, not bothering to garner the attention of his fellow shinobi. His father frowned. What are you saying, Asuma? Asuma stepped forward, moving his arms to his sides. It's a pretty simple statement. I'll take him. I'll take Naruto as my own son. His father's eyes widened, his lips parting and forming into what might have been taken as a minuscule smile, but what Asuma knew to be an expression of shock. Mitokado shook his head. Impossible. Adopting him into the Sarutobi clan. It wouldn't be the Sarutobi clan, Asuma spoke easily. He regarded his father before speaking. I'd simply renounce any claims to the Sarutobi estate. Naruto would get my name, and meeting certain requirements, the details of which I leave to you and my father, would eventually have the opportunity to become a fully fledged heir of the Sarutobi estate. His father still stared at him in disbelief. Tokado and Yutane debated amongst themselves in sharp, rapid whispers. Kakashi was looking at him as though he were sorely tempted to bring out his Sharingan eye and check for a Genjutsu. His father addressed him. Asuma, if this is about. It's not. He cut his father's train of thought off sharply. I've cleared myself of that. Be that as it may, is this something you're sure of? You won't be able to simply shrug this off if you feel it becomes too much of a burden to you. Asuma kept his temper. I have no intention of shrugging it off, regardless of how much of a burden my decision carries. Jiraiya spoke. Why are you volunteering for this all of a sudden? Did Minato say something to you before he died? Asuma wasn't perturbed. Minato said many things to me before he died. He helped teach me, after all. That doesn't answer my question. Asuma. If you do this, I don't see how you're going to be able to fulfill your ambition of training under the 12 Guardian Ninja. His father's tone was cautious, low, and held relief. Asuma didn't know, and he wouldn't be able to pursue the matter now. Asuma smiled. On the contrary. I see this as the perfect opportunity to give Naruto a few years away from what I'm sure is going to be a less than friendly environment. How do you mean? Yutane asked. Asuma resisted the urge to be condescending in return, instead turning to address everyone in the room. I think everyone here is intelligent and experienced enough to realize what will happen after things settle down in the village. He nodded his head towards Hayashi. It's true we lost a lot of people tonight, shinobi and civilian, and every one of the survivors is going to be looking for someone or something to take out their pain, and with the QB absent, it's not going to be much of a leap for them to focus all that anger on its container. That's the point of the law I proposed. His father seemed too calm at the moment. You're not that naive. Are you just tired, or too used to being Hokage? That won't do anything. Law is just technicality. Technically, they won't be able to say anything to him regarding the QB, but technically he left the statement unfinished. Kakashi picked it up easily. Nothing will prevent them from simply ignoring or ridiculing him. And he won't know why. Asuma resumed his thought. A few years out of the village will let things simmer down, give Naruto a chance to be somewhere where no one is going to associate him with something that he has absolutely no control over. Nothing we do is going to erase the feeling of resentment that some in the village will feel for him, but I see no reason why his first few years should be marred by the experience of being shunned for his circumstances. He his arms again, waiting for further comment. Jiraiya was still giving him an appraising look, his head tilted up, eyes narrowed like he was examining an interesting and possibly dangerous animal. The counselors had since ceased their hurried debate, reverting to their previously placid outward appearances. While it might be possible to avoid a fallout over your adoption of Naruto with the procedure you suggested, taking him with you as a member of 12 Guardians would place the daimyo at considerable risk if the boy's past were fully elucidated and attention was drawn to him. Asuma shrugged. It's no more danger than Konoha would be in if he were found out while he was here. Only in that case, more people would probably die. He let that pass over for a few moments before continuing. In any case, I can pass him off as an adopted son easily enough, and there's nothing which says I can't have him with me while I'm training to become one of the Guardians. Mitokado shook his head. The daimyo won't want a Jinchuriki so close to him. If something happens in Konoha, far more people would be in danger than if something were to happen in a remote training location. Naruto isn't going to be anywhere near the daimyo in any case. And what will happen when you're called to serve as one of the 12 Guardians in some capacity? Who will look after your son in that instance? I'll make arrangements before that situation arises. There's plenty of time to plan for contingencies. Who will examine the integrity of the boy's seal, and make sure that the Kyuubi isn't gaining influence? Asuma cast a thoughtful look at Jiraiya. You were never planning on staying in Konoha for long after this incident, were you? The Sannin frowned. I don't believe I ever stated my intentions, one way or the other. But you weren't, were you? Asuma pressed. After a moment of silence, Jiraiya conceded. No. I need to stay in the field to maintain my spy network, and get a feel for what's happening in the aftermath of Kyuubi's attack. What does this have to do with your decision? I'm not a seal master, and neither are any of the other jounin of my generation. You're the only one here who has enough knowledge and experience with seals to be able to detect and repair abnormalities in Minato's work. With you gone, it doesn't matter where Naruto is. He could be the daimyo's new retainer, for all the good it would do us to have someone inexperienced poking at the Kyuubi's prison. Jiraiya muttered, recognition of a defective seal isn't that difficult, especially when the entity being sealed has such a distinctive chakra signature. Asuma smiled. Well, then I'd be very grateful for some lessons in the basics of sealing before I leave. Sealing is an extremely difficult subject. I can't teach you the basics in only a couple of days. It would take weeks at the least, depending on your level of skill. Asuma was nonplussed. I have no intention of leaving immediately. It's been pointed out pretty thoroughly that we don't fully understand the nature of Minato's seal. He paused. A year at least, I think. Possibly more, just to give Naruto some time to grow. And me, to get a firmer grip on all this. Asuma frowned as it occurred to him that smoke probably wouldn't be the best thing to expose a small child to. Hayashi snorted. This is ridiculous. You're talking as though you've already been given leave to pursue this crazy venture. Why are you actually doing this? What do you stand to gain by adopting a child you have no reason to be personally involved with? What indeed? I wouldn't say I have no reason to become personally involved with him. We all do, whether we like it or not. As for me, I have my own reasons, which, I can assure you, have nothing to do with upsetting the balance of power here. He looked to his father. He still thinks it's all naive discontent. It is a tampering with the balance of power. Konoha's balance against the rest of the elemental nations. If they find out that the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki is wandering around Fire Country, it will be viewed as a sign of weakness, and with our recent losses. Then let the people of the village talk. Asuma crossed his arms again. Don't make any law that forbids them, in fact encourage them. Throw out some rumor that we have Naruto confined and away from the populace. They'll embellish that. By the time any word reaches the other nations, they'll be under the impression that we're training Naruto to be used as a weapon of war. Kakashi nodded slowly, his silent approval reinforcing Asuma's resolve. Danzo spoke in his crinkling voice. A threat that would be made more substantial by what took place tonight. He regarded Jiraiya. Your network would be useful in propagating such activity, if done carefully. He placed stress on the last word, which did nothing to alleviate the other man's reservations. Fine. You'd have some safeguard, and you might even placate the populace, but you've forgotten about Naruto. What happens when he comes back, and he's hit by the backlash of the realization that the place that should be his home reveled in the thought of his imprisonment? He'll be ready for that. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell him about what happened tonight. I'll support him, encourage him, train him. He'll return with a confidence that he never would have had if he'd been raised in a place where his existence would have been ridiculed. The Hokage spoke. You're going to tell him that Minato is his father? Is that apprehension in your voice, father? Asuma didn't doubt his decision now. When he's ready, yes. I don't think it's wise to deny him his heritage, even if for practical purposes I'll be his father. And what about his academy training? A shinobi working on nothing except high-level missions for the daimyo isn't going to give him the kind of practical experience with field and teamwork he'll need to be a successful part of the military. Asuma eyed Jiraiya again. The average academy graduation age is what? 10? 11? I'll have him back before then, and his skills will be on par with, if not surpassing, every other student in his age group. His father smiled, and he looked younger because of it. Well? What do you have to say about this? I'm willing to take Naruto and raise him as my own son, offer him as much support as he needs to become a successful shinobi and member of the Leaf. He paused, expelling a breath, his voice quiet. And more importantly, I'll be able to secure a heritage for him. Whether his father heard his words, Asuma didn't know. All he saw were the beginnings of words that were never spoken, a frown or a smile that never formed. His face stilled, calm and lacking any sort of deliberate expression. He nodded his head, the gesture sending shock waves through the room and everyone present, the fronts of which Asuma knew would shake Konoha and the lands beyond its walls. His father, the Sandaime Hokage, had returned. By the time the sun broke the horizon, the detachment had returned, tired, wounded, hungry, but slowly savoring the feeling of steady accomplishment that accompanied their success. Missing Nin? A wayward faction. The details didn't really matter at this point. Chirika had told them that they would be dealing with a potential security threat, and that their possible opponents should be considered as chunin to Jounin rank. Scant information, as Asuma had plainly voiced, though his opinions seemed to carry little weight for all the good they did in persuading his seniors to elaborate. Regardless of their scant briefing, he'd sustained nothing worse than a cut on his left arm, the result of a shuriken shattering against his chakra blade and bypassing his defenses. He frowned now that he thought of it. He should have made the blades thinner, put more energy behind them so that he'd get as clean a cut as possible. But that would have meant more stress on the metal, and the first time he tried to infuse his chakra into a knife, he'd ended up bending the blade in on itself, folding it as easily as he would have a roll of tin. Worse, he might not have been able to maintain them at that thickness. He ran his thumb along the handle of his knife. It felt just the same as it had before, no signs of stress or unusual wear. Just another matter to work on. Asuma. He turned at the sound of his name, squinting as the sun hit his face. It felt like the light was somehow sapping his energy. His eyelids seemed heavier, and the cut on his arm burned briefly. Find a proper medic to get this taken care of as quickly as possible. Another priority. Yes, Chirika? He tried a more respectful title at first, but his friend had insisted they address each other on a first-name basis. Chirika gestured and they moved forward. Your performance today was exemplary. Your father wasn't exaggerating when he said you'd carry the Sarutobi name with pride. Ashram smiled. I think this is about the fourth time you've commented on how true my father's appraisal of me is. Are you trying to imply that I'm being too humble? Perhaps. You'd make a very good squad leader, if you were more ambitious. Well, Asuma tried to sound thoughtful. I've found I'm always fairly motivated when there's a shogi board, a hot meal, and a cigarette waiting for me at the end of the climb. Find yourself a girlfriend then. If only everyone's aspirations were so easily reachable. Easy? I think you're grossly underestimating the difficulty in finding a good woman. Especially one who's willing to wait for you all the time. He paused. Not that it sounds all that interesting to be with someone who does nothing but wait. Ah, then you're more driven than I first thought. Chirika smiled, his face retaining its usual serene quality. Serene, instead of relaxed? Asuma doubted his own face looked like that, even when he slept. Thinking back, he'd been told he snored and turned in his sleep like a restless animal. Sensei, now that the mission is over, I was wondering if you could tell me exactly what we were trying to accomplish. Chirika nodded. The men we fought today were members of the daimyo's day-to-day guard. Adequate ninja, but not really given any specialized training. We suspected that they might have been dealing in information trading, regarding the content of meetings between the daimyo and the leadership of Konoha. Do we know who they were trading with? That's what we were hoping to figure out. We sent Daichi to them, in the hopes that he could uncover what they were doing in a less confrontational manner, but as you can see that didn't quite go as planned. Asuma only nodded. Daichi had taken the worst of it. He'd been caught off guard, incapacitated with a poison that had been brought from Suna, and had 3 fingers broken in the process of interrogation. That gave Asuma pause. He'd broken fingers in the past. It hurt, gods did it hurt, but there were more invasive ways to get information, and in all their apparent preparation, they hadn't even bothered to bind his chakra, poison notwithstanding. And Daichi was no slouch, particularly when it came to close-quarter combat. Sensei, Asuma turned, about to voice his concerns, but his friend simply nodded. I know. He'd lost his smile, but didn't express any further emotion. Asuma supposed he should try to emulate that placid exterior. It's good you catch on quickly. Asuma sighed. So I suppose you're nudging me into a position of leadership isn't just a way to make up for lack of conversation? Loyalty to a good cause can be inspired in many ways, and a good leader is one of the best I've come across. Better than you? Not that my ego isn't swelling at the attention. Younger than me. Closer to Konoha than me. You're the Hokage's son, and could have stayed and had a position of authority, and inherited your clan's mantle of leadership, as well as its techniques, and yet you chose to join us here. I've told you my reasons. They're nothing special. I actually think they're fairly selfish. And fairly cliché. I should have at least made them a bit more creative. No. Think on them more thoroughly. You'll find that they're far less self-serving than you think. Asuma had nothing to say to that. He only made a small noise of acknowledgement, and placed his hands in his pockets. Communication with Konoha had been reduced to a few letters exchanged at a 4-month interval. A message from his father came regularly, along with a batch of letters from his fellow shinobi. Kakashi had sent him a brief message, encoded and set to immolate at the sign of Foreign Chakra, detailing the latest release of Aika Aika. Asuma pitied the poor genin that might someday have him as an instructor. And his father's recent letter had been nothing if not supportive, painting a positive picture of affairs in the leaf, ending with what Asuma could only interpret as the sincerest of encouragement. And he seemed so much more animated when expressing himself through the pen. Age hadn't touched his mind, even it did press on his body. He shifted his hands and his arm burned again. He didn't know what he'd do to unwind after seeing the medic. A year ago, maybe even a few months ago, he might have been tempted by the pack of cigarettes he'd left next to his bed, but he'd found his craving dwindling as time wore on, going through only half a pack a day now. He'd been tempted to assume that Chirika had something to do with it, placing something in his tea, but that wasn't how the man operated. Nothing else was said between the two men for the remainder of their walk. If Chirika had something he would rather have been doing than seeing Asuma off to his home, he did nothing to indicate it, keeping that same calm expression that only wavered when he spoke to greet a passerby. Asuma simply inclined his head towards anyone who passed him. Everyone he passed smiled, seeming pleased to see the two men. It was something Asuma had often imagined experiencing while still in the Leaf. He'd completed more than his fair share of missions, had served in the war, but had never done anything to earn street recognition. Experiencing that acknowledgement now felt ordinary, almost. He'd felt embarrassed the first time someone he'd never met had called him by name, congratulating him on his service. A shinobi wasn't supposed to strive for recognition. If anything, anonymity was preferred. Such was his new life. The two stopped in front of Asuma's door. The roof extended a few feet forward, sloping down to provide cover from sun and rain. Think on what I said, Asuma. You have no reason to doubt your motivations. Your service here speaks for itself. Thank you, Sensei. He swallowed. And the situation from before will be discussed soon. I'll call on you in the evening, when I can. Rest until then. With a smile, Chiriku turned and left. Asuma exhaled and entered his home, removing his shoes at the front. He walked down the hall, past the kitchen and sitting room, turning left instead of right. He'd left instructions to make sure there was enough food in the house, and that it was clean from day to day. The man and woman were a couple, former shinobi, so they knew how to follow orders. His pace slowed as he came to the door. The light was off, and the door only slightly ajar. He pushed it open slowly, saw the empty bed and... Dad! Asuma smiled even before Naruto's excited outbursts, turning only when the boy was almost on him. He had to kneel so Naruto could get a proper grip on him, small arms wrapping around his neck. It still amazed Asuma how small the boy was. Even at 4, he still felt minuscule in the man's arms. He's going to need watching after, when he starts running around. Naruto had already placed a small kiss on his cheek, wrinkling his nose as his face came into contact with his father's stubble. Your face is funny again, the boy chided. Asuma hummed as he carried Naruto into the kitchen, wondering if this early rising would turn out to be a habit. Not a bad one for a shinobi to have, but at such a young age he let Naruto sit on the edge of the table. He could never get the boy to sit in a high chair, and he now indulged in the room he had and was kicking his legs out. Did you win? Naruto looked at him, eyes wide with excitement. Asuma chuckled, indeed I did. He opened the refrigerator and sighed when he saw the quarter-full bottle. Milk, he decided, was vastly overrated. Naruto couldn't get enough of it before, but when he'd heard that drinking milk would help him grow taller, he'd given Asuma one long appraising look before bolting into the kitchen and trying to open the refrigerator to serve himself. But you know, Naruto, Asuma spoke as he handed him a nearly full glass, Sometimes winning isn't as clear as it seems. I should get this out of the way now. Heroism and hubris are all good in theory, but in the field. Naruto's voice came out deep and muffled from behind the glass. He quickly finished it and gave his father undivided attention. Then Asuma hesitated. Maybe it's too soon, if I can't even come to terms with exactly what it means to be a shinobi. Instead, he smiled broadly and ruffled Naruto's hair, earning him a giggle and a grin. They sat in silence for a moment, Naruto turning the glass in his hand, watching as the small pool of milk glazed the surface of the glass with a thin film. Asuma leaned on the table with the elbow of his uninjured arm, resting his head against his open hand as his father often did. Even after deliberately avoiding his office, I still pick up his habits. Hey, Dad. Naruto bit his lip and glanced at his father before averting his gaze. Something wrong, Naru? Naruto pointed before speaking. Can I see your knife? Asuma moved his elbow and looked down at the handle of the weapon before grabbing it and pulling it from the sheath. Red light gleamed off the flat of the blade, a bright spot burning across his vision. He held the blade in front of Naruto, edge facing him, then turned it slowly. Naruto stared at the display with a look of awe, his eyes shifting at every minute motion, as though he were imagining Asuma wielding it, though he had yet to demonstrate or practice in front of him with any weapons. He thinks it's beautiful. Asuma didn't know what to make of that. Having made the weapon himself, he appreciated its craftsmanship better than anyone, but that came from his own pride in his skill, rather than what the weapon could do. He smiled at that, but he knew the expression held no humor. Which is why I want to sharpen the blades, I suppose? Can I hold it? Naruto's hushed, eager voice cut through to him. Asuma sheathed the blade. Not yet, Naruto. You haven't trained enough to use a weapon like this yet. I don't want to use it. I just want to hold it. He sounded sullen now. After you've trained more. Asuma leaned back, the chair creaking against his weight. Naruto perked up at that. Today? Can we train today? Asuma fought back a yawn, simply nodding. Later. After I've slept for a bit. Naruto nodded eagerly and slid off the table, moving close to Asuma and placing a small, warm hand against his knee. I did my worksheets too. Wanna see? Asuma felt that hand tug at his own. Sure. Let's go see. He followed the excited boy back down the hall, rubbing the side of his face with a hand as he went. Naruto's room was just as clean as when he'd left for his mission. All the books and papers were kept on shelves and his nightstand, stacked and organized for easy access. Asuma had built him a desk. After he'd started learning to write, cleaning ink stains out of his sheets had worn out his patience after the third incident in a week. His bed had also been something of a struggle, as Naruto seemed to have an almost unhealthy obsession with bright colors, including a headache-inducing shade of neon orange that Asuma couldn't even pretend to like. He told Naruto that ninjas always use dark, subdued colors, and that, coupled with the promise of starting his training regimen early, had allowed him to replace garish orange with dark blue and green. Jounin colors. See? Naruto happily presented him with the papers. Asuma knelt to examine them, taking care to look over each one before moving on to the next. Naruto's penmanship was excellent for a child his age, especially considering his gender. Each character was perfectly legible, and it looked like he knew exactly where to lift and flick the brush to get the proper effect on the ends of characters. He noticed black smudges on the edges of some of the pages. If he could learn to do this without spilling anything, then he could make good on his mother's side of the family. Do you like them? Naruto's voice sounded shy even as he looked on expectantly. Asuma smiled. They're excellent, Naruto. You write characters much better than I did when I was your age. Thank you, Dad. Naruto ran forward and threw his arms around his neck again, squeezing tightly. Dad. Asuma hugged him back as fully as he could in his current position, deciding to lift him and place him on the bed after a few moments. Naruto looked just as energetic as he had the moment he met Asuma in the hall. Asuma knelt so he was at eye level with Naruto. All right. You did very well while I was gone, and we're going to continue your training, but right now, I'm very tired, and need some sleep. Missions are hard work. Naruto nodded. I know. And yet he doesn't even look remotely exhausted. Naruto, did you stay up late last night? Naruto bit his lip and Asuma didn't pursue the question further. You need to get sleep too. Can you promise me that you'll do that? Naruto nodded. Naruto, if you can keep that promise and sleep for the rest of the morning, I'll start you on a different style of taijutsu. Naruto was speechless, never good, before bounding towards Asuma again, his speech coming out as nothing more than one-word exclamations. Asuma sighed, his mouth curving slightly. Remember, Naruto, you need to sleep. What did I tell you about how shinobi behave? He sat upright suddenly. Quiet and calm. Asuma nodded, that's right. It's good to develop those habits now, so they'll become second nature to you later on. All right, Dad. I'll get to sleep. Like a ninja. He had a solemn look on his expression that made Asuma frown for a moment. Instead, he kissed Naruto's forehead, making the boy smile again. Sleep well, Naruto. Asuma cracked his neck as after he'd closed the door. He moved across the hall, through the door frame, removing his shirt as he walked. Pausing in front of the bed, he took a deep breath and fell onto the sheets. Sleep took him in seconds. Dad. It came to him like something shouted from the end of a long tunnel. His vision flickered before darkening again. Dad. This time his body shifted, like someone was trying to turn him over. His breath came out as a long sigh. He shifted, stilled, and... Duh. Asuma's body snapped into a sitting position. He heard Naruto jump back in surprise. What time is it? He blinked to bring his vision back into focus. Naruto swallowed, trying to compose himself. Chiriku, he left the statement hanging, unsure of how to properly address the man. Asuma would have cursed if not for his company. Where is he? Naruto immediately assumed a serious stance. You said no strangers. Chiriku isn't. Asuma felt a sudden heat in his chest and arms. He shook his head. He felt like he'd been sleeping all day, and his head hurt. All right, Naruto. Show me where he is. He stood and followed the boy as he ran down the hall, towards the door. How long has he been waiting outside? Asuma's hand brushed the wall as he went. He shook his head to clear his vision again. Chiriku stood just outside the door, sheltered by the sloping roof, looking no worse for wear than when they parted ways a few hours ago. By the expression on his sensei's face, it seemed the same could not be said for Asuma. You don't look well. Do you have a fever? Asuma paused before attempting to reply in the negative. Fever he hadn't felt hot until a few moments ago, and now it seemed as though his body was rapidly dumping heat, his temperature careening towards a more normal level. He squinted. No, I just overslept. He felt something brush against his leg. Naruto was looking up at Chiriku, rocking from foot to foot as though trying to decide if he could relax or needed to find shelter with his father. But he knows Chiriku. I introduced them months ago. For someone his age, that might as well have been a decade ago. Your son seems a bit apprehensive, Asuma. He had a kind smile on his face, something that would have been taken as fatherly to most observers. Son, that's exactly what I agreed to. He's actually quite outgoing most of the time. Asuma smiled down at Naruto. This is Chiriku. He's one of my closest friends here. You met him when you were younger, but I guess it was too short a time, and you don't really remember. Naruto stopped his rocking and stepped forward, moving within a foot of Chiriku before inclining his head slightly. It's nice to meet you, he stopped and tried to find the right words. Chiriku laughed. It's nice to see you again as well, Naruto. Though I suppose if you don't remember me, then you are indeed meeting me for the first time, in a way. He looked at Asuma. You've taught him very good manners, it seems. Well, he's seen me do that with officials and other monks often enough that I guess he picked it up. He nodded his head. Good job, Naruto. He received a smile for the compliment. Before I'm accused of neglecting my own manners, why don't we step inside? As Asuma raised his hand to motion them in, he noticed that his fingers were trembling. Not the hand as a whole, but each individual appendage seemed to be vibrating with its own minuscule rhythm. He formed a tight fist as he walked forward. Medic Nin, after this was done, he'd go straight there. Naruto had already made his way to the kitchen and climbed on the chair to assume his usual post-ion at the edge of the table. Asuma felt sweat on his brow as he stepped into the room. The sunlight caused him to squint, stabbing through his eyes and at his skull so his headache bloomed and throbbed. He took his seat, along with a heavy breath, and felt Chiriku's hand on his shoulder. Asuma, you really don't look well. Perhaps you should see a medical Nin, and we can resume our meeting tomorrow. Are you sick, Dad? Naruto edged closer to him, his eyes wide. No, I'm fine, just tired is all. And stupid, apparently. Neglecting an injury, but it's only been a day, less than that. You came here to talk about what I mentioned earlier, I assume. Chiriku nodded. There are details I'd prefer to discuss in private, and I didn't want to keep you from home any longer than necessary. That was kind of you. Thank you? He swallowed heavily and cleared his throat. Why don't I make us some tea? I think that would help me relax. I would welcome it in any case. Asuma stood with some effort, making his way to the stove to retrieve the iron pot. Naruto was in the meantime living up to his potential as an extrovert and plowing ahead with his curiosity. Are you on Dad's team? He still sat more in the center of the table, not quite making the leap of closer contact. Yes, you could say that. Your father and I are on the same team. Lately some people who we thought were on our side have started to make it seem as though they're not happy with our team. Oh. So are they bad then? Pay close attention to what Chirika says, Naruto. Having all the information is always important. Asuma set down the pot without poise, causing the metal beneath it to rattle in protest. Keeping people in the dark only serves to make them accustomed to it. Naruto seemed to brighten at that, and scooted a bit closer. I wouldn't say that they're bad. We don't know why they're doing what they're doing. It could be that they're being forced to act, or it could be that they've simply lost their way. How can they get lost? Where are they going? Naruto's face scrunched in concentration. Where indeed? He paused. Naruto, do you know what you want to do with your life, once you're grown up? Naruto grinned, and Asuma couldn't help but feel a bit better at the sight. The boy could express happiness like a distilled product. Or maybe it was something all children possessed, and it only became adulterated later in life. I want to be strong, like my dad. He looked towards Asuma. Oh. Even knowing the answer as he had, Asuma couldn't help but feel something gnawing in his gut, a slow spread of shame. Didn't I take him in so he could be normal? At least be able to have someone help him achieve his goals. You want to be like your father, Asuma smiled, though he couldn't place why. And how do you want to achieve that? Naruto frowned. Training? How else would I? A good way to proceed. However, what would happen if after all that training you still weren't able to reach your goal? The road you took didn't bring you to the destination you thought it would, even though you followed it exactly. I'd train more. The response came automatically. I'm going to have to drill something besides ambition into him. Asuma saw steam rising from the spout of the kettle and took it off the stove. I see. But what if training even more wouldn't get you what you wanted? Would you try to get what you wanted, no matter what happened to those around you? Naruto opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He looked at his hands as though contemplating using them to hurt someone. When he faced Asuma, he again looked determined. I wouldn't hurt my dad. He said it so plainly that Asuma couldn't help but take it as a fact. Chirika nodded and looked at Asuma, who only gave a brief nod. He knew where the conversation was going. That's good to know, Naruto. But what would you do if there were others you could use to get to your goal, people you've never even met? What would you do then? Again, Naruto hesitated. I don't know. He looked at Asuma, guilt shaping his features. He's looking to me no matter what. It's been like this since he could talk, but even so Asuma poured the tea and set the cups on the table. That's also a good answer. Think on it every once in a while. Chiriku finished with a slow nod as Naruto's brow furrowed. Don't think that the answer's going to come quickly, Naruto. It always takes time to learn anything worthwhile. Asuma paused as he sat. That's why most people never learn anything at all. Naruto nodded, though his expression was at odds with his gesture. I wonder if he's nodding just to please me, or because he thinks it will make people take him seriously if they think that he knows something even if he doesn't. Never hesitate to ask the question because you're afraid of not appearing smart. That'll have to do until experience actually drives the lesson into him. This time Naruto nodded in earnest, his expression in perfect sync. I won't. Asuma took a drink. For a moment his heart rate jumped, and he could feel sweat start to form on his body. He shook his head and rubbed his eyes, not even feeling tired, but almost detached seemed to be the only word that would work. He could hear Chirika's voice clearly enough, and he could make out the expression on Naruto's face without trouble, but right now it all seemed synthetic, like he was witnessing a play with badly chosen actors. Asuma, your chakra flared just now. Chirika moved closer, his features somehow sharpening as he did so. No, he shook his head again, focusing on the cup in front of him, and on the surface of the green liquid rippling just inches from his face. Dad? Naruto was also moving towards him. We need to get to a medic. Asuma made a motion to stand, his hand pushing against the table. He still had the cup in his other hand as he fell forward, hearing Naruto's scream even before he could make out the sound of shattering porcelain on the tile. The pain didn't recede when Asuma opened his eyes. Sometimes, when he went to sleep after a mission that had gone badly, he'd dream of the pain that had been inflicted on him: burns, cuts, broken bones. His body responded to them as though he were actually in the field, but the moment he woke, his injuries evaporated, and he was left exhausted and still haunted by the memories of the previous day. No. This time the pain hadn't been ephemeral. His eyelids snapped shut almost as soon as they saw the bright, white light. It felt like someone had placed his head in a vice and twisted the handle as far as they physically could. Taking a breath, he squinted, the world blurring and burning before him as the pain in his head slowly escalated before evening out and slowly receding into a throbbing background, blotting his senses like static on a radio. His next breath awoke the pain in his arm and chest, catching the air before he had a chance to use. He let out a grunt. No, the pain was there before, but my head, my arm, the shuriken, stupid. If he could see me now. He did see me though, didn't he? Asuma tested his voice. It came out low and hoarse, as he'd expected, but his throat felt dry, and he was sure he hadn't spoken in hours. Or days. He didn't know what unit of measure to use yet, and that unsettled him more than anything else. If the poison was from Suna, it could easily be days, and I should be happy I'm alive. Maybe it was diluted just for that purpose. Most of his encounters with poisons came from the pages of history, which he'd admittedly been eager to read through. Poison had been one of Suna's greatest and most feared weapons. Hundreds dying. Black faces, blood clotting in their veins, drowning them. Muscles hard as rock, air frozen in their lungs, eyes glassy and dead, spinning around in futile panic. His case seemed comparatively minor in the face of such accounts. Though if someone had diluted a poison so precisely, then they must have had at least some contact with Wind Country. Asuma tilted his head to the side. White. Gray. White walls and gray floors. Dull colors. He almost would have preferred Naruto's choices. His eyes widened, causing the steady wave of pain behind them to expand. Naruto, he must be. What would he be? Worried, certainly, but Chiriku could be trusted to keep him calm, and the seal should be strong enough. I'd be burnt to cinder by now if it hadn't been. No. Asuma relaxed again. If nothing else, the boy had shown good resolve. He'd have panicked initially, to be sure, but that was also to be expected. He'll be shaken up, and I'll have to calm him down a bit. Then I can investigate this. He felt a sudden electric apprehension bloom in his stomach. He flexed his fingers and controlled his breathing. It was like a first real mission all over again. Unknown enemy, unknown motive, unknown stakes. It would be worth the setback, if his ordeal had given them a shred of information about their opponents. The door opened, and his head turned sharply by reflex. He winced at the shock, and had almost no time to calm himself as he saw what he assumed was the medic, judging by his outfit. Ah, Sarutobi-san. You're awake. That's very good news. Oh. And what were the chances of bad news? How long was I asleep? 2 days. It took a bit of time for us to pinpoint poison as the culprit, and then we had to isolate it and make sure there was no lasting damage. We lowered your heart rate as much as possible. That's what was killing you, actually. Asuma frowned. My heart? Was it affecting the muscles of my heart? The man shook his head. No. Thankfully, this poison didn't attack your organs directly. It's actually more of a stimulant, just concentrated and thickened. It throws your chakra regulation out of control, places a great deal of stress on your body, makes it use more and more energy. I was injured just a few hours before morning. Collapsed late in the afternoon. You'd barely notice it in the thick of battle. Afterward you'd write it off as exhaustion from combat, sleep, and then the man paused and regarded him. Here you are. Asuma would have nodded had his head not been resting on the pillow. He instead raised it, inciting surprisingly little pain as he did so. I'd like some water. The medic nodded. Certainly. He picked up a glass from the stand next to Asuma's bed and filled it from the sink on the other side of the room. Asuma took it in his hands, his grip steady. He propped himself up with one elbow, the wound on his arm giving a dull protest that ended in discomfort near his hand and shoulder. After swallowing the glass contents, he cleared his throat and managed to speak in a clearer voice. How soon can you tell Chiriku that I'm awake? I'd planned on leaving to inform him now, unless you need anything else? No. Some food later on, but I'm fine for now. Thank you for everything you've done. The man nodded curtly. It's my job, Sarutobi-san. I'll return with Chiriku shortly. With that, he turned and left the room, softly closing the door behind him. His job, HM? And my job is to protect the daimyo, though a fine job I'm doing, neglecting a wound like this because I wanted to go to bed first. And Naruto. He's my job as well. He'll be even more excitable after this. Asuma pressed his head against the pillow again. He'd stay here for the rest of the day, go home in the evening, keep his bandages on for an extra day or so, and then return to service as though nothing had happened. Physically, at any rate. If he'd been more cautious, more paranoid, even, this might have been averted. Always assume the worst-case scenario. That's what Kakashi would have said, while reading that stupid book of his. But then in the worst case, I'd be dead. I'd always have to regard myself as being dead. Or captured. He exhaled. There were worse things to experience than death, in this line of work. This could be a good way to explain that to Naruto, but he was barely coming up on his 5th year. Kakashi made Chunin at 6. He knew that well enough. But do I want another Kakashi? The door opened again before Asuma had time to pursue his thought further. Chiriku stepped through the frame, his expression revealing no emotion, though Asuma had a good enough idea of what would be coming. He braced himself on the bed. He'd been careless, and he'd admit that, he'd learned from that, count himself lucky that he could learn from it. Chiriku remained silent as he sat in the chair next to the bed, not looking directly at Asuma, just in his direction. Lost in his thought, his face smoothed of apprehension and anger, he might have been visiting an old friend to discuss books and philosophy, instead of a comrade in arms who'd almost lost his life. Died like a genin. That's what would have been said about me. Or maybe experience dulls our senses in some way. We neglect the small things like nicks and cuts, and let them fester. Asuma. Chiriku's voice brought him up. It had none of the refinement of his features. If anything, the man sounded troubled. Had something happened while he was out? Sensei, I know I was careless, and I should have sought out a medic as soon as I returned. Asuma, your son is waiting outside. He stared. Naruto? Why did you bring him here so soon? I know he must be worried, but I thought what? He frowned. What? That he'd be sitting at home, doing his worksheets while I'm in the hospital, possibly dead? Did that cross Naruto's mind? You should see him. Again, there was that hint of uncertainty, apprehension. I will. I plan to. I'm just a little well, I've never been in a situation quite like this before. Neither has he. A pause. I meant, rather than simply greeting and conversing with him, you should understand what he went through. What he's going through. Asuma couldn't find words. Can you sit up? Yeah. I should be able to. He slowly went through the same motions he'd used when he'd been drinking the water, placing more of his weight on his good arm, using the strength of his abdomen to bring himself into a sitting position. He felt none of the odd acuity and separation that had afflicted him before the collapse. He sat with his head lowered for a moment, taking in the condition of his body and accounting for each point of pain on his arm, his head and chest. He would be able to move normally after walking around for a bit. Maybe before Naruto walked in, he should do that, to show him that there was nothing to worry about anymore. I'll get him now if you're ready. Chiriku had already risen from his seat. Asuma nodded, deciding to remain on the bed. He raised his head and looked towards the door, his heart beating faster. But Naruto would be fine. Is fine. You should see him. Just a few seconds. Chiriku entered the room first. Asuma frowned. He'd expected Naruto first, even if his usual enthusiasm was subdued. After shutting the door, Chiriku moved to the side, and Naruto stood at the foot of the door. Dad, he spoke in barely a whisper. If the room hadn't been almost totally silent, Asuma wouldn't have been able to hear him. Naruto's breath came out in long, stammering expulsions, his arms were stiff, his whole body seemed almost synthetic. Like after the Kyuubi had attacked. Those expressions of sorrow and disbelief. He looks helpless. His eyes. His face. This is my son. Naruto. Asuma cleared his throat, making sure his voice was clear of obstruction. Naruto. He swallowed. Come here. Naruto stilled, his eyes and face changing to express disbelief. No. Wonder. Asuma still couldn't place it. He was almost taken by surprise when Naruto broke out his trance and ran forward, climbing onto the bed and wrapping his arms as far around his waist as they could go. Dad. He said it with the same softness, trying to keep his face out of Asuma's shirt so his voice wouldn't be muffled. He looked up, to make eye contact, to desperately acknowledge the man in front of him. His father. This is my son. He saw the world without me. The void? What was it? Afraid of Chiriku, of another person. Looked to me for comfort. Naruto. And then he was crying. Not sobs or sniffles or a thin wall of resolve against barely contained sorrow. He bowed his head and let the tears fall freely. They rolled down and stained his cheeks. His face. Asuma moved his hand and brushed his thumb against the scarred skin. He brushed again, with his other hand, the other cheek. Naruto looked up. His eyes. Asuma put his hand on Naruto's head, his touch light at first, as though he were afraid that his head was fragile. Then he curled his fingers until his hand was cupping the back of Naruto's head, drawing him closer in small, smooth motions. His tears still fell. He knew. Asuma's own vision blurred. This is my son. Naruto. He said the name again, not knowing what else to do. He just brought around his other hand and placed it on Naruto's back. I'm here. That was all he could say. Is that all I'll ever be able to? He shifted, smiling a bit. He sat with Naruto and didn't speak. He could feel the heat and the heartbeat against his body, and that provided him with enough comfort and assurance to stay still. After a time, Naruto stilled, his head drooping against Asuma's stomach. Asleep. Asuma leaned back, making sure to keep his arms as steady as possible. Dull pain pressed into his back and neck, but he didn't mind. He wondered if Naruto had even slept since he'd been in the hospital. He sighed. It would take more time for both of them to recover. He'd need to start Naruto on more rigorous training. Even their taijutsu had been mostly stances so far, with very little emphasis on dynamics. Weapons. Kunai. Shuriken. Proficiency in both could be developed at a young age, and that would sever him well for the rest of his life. It might even prolong his life. Chakra control would be developed in tandem with that. He'd probably have large reserves, even without his resident butting in. Jiraiya would have to be contacted to examine the seal and see if their theories about mixing were correct. Asuma could try his own hand just to observe, but he had no intention of probing any deeper than a cursory examination. History. Asuma nodded, Naruto shifting in his arms. He'd need to know about Konoha before he'd be able to process Kyuubi. The ninja wars. Clans. Bloodlines. His heritage. He exhaled. His heritage. That would take some time to set up properly. He'd have to be older, more experienced. There was potential there for him to be motivated, and just as much to make him stagnate. Asuma slowed his train of thought as he realized the silence of the room. He looked up and noticed that Chirka wasn't present. The situation involving his poisoning still needed to be addressed. He couldn't rush that. A swift resolution, but not reckless. He could train Naruto in the meantime. And Chiriku. Asuma looked to the door as though that would summon the man back into the room. Naruto would be asleep for hours and he'd been in the bed for 2 days. He tensed the muscles in his legs. They were fine. He swallowed. And he had to eat. Pausing for a moment, he gently moved himself into a sitting position. Naruto stirred but didn't wake, just mumbled and exhaled loudly. Next, Asuma swept one leg across the mattress, letting it touch the floor. He did the same thing with his other leg, his feet quickly adjusting to the cold. All right. Let's see if endurance training actually did anything for me. He stood slowly, his body moving without protest. Only his arms stung him, and his head still ached, but he could manage easily. Standing, he turned and set Naruto on the bed. Asuma looked down at him, his face smooth and tranquil, his body relaxed. Asuma smiled. He's at peace for now. He found Chirika waiting outside, standing with his hands behind his back as though he had nothing he'd rather be doing. Asuma spoke quietly. I saw him. I know what you meant. Chiriku only nodded. And do you see what would happen to him if you died now? Asuma wasn't surprised. No blunting the blow, sensei? Would it be any different if I were in Konoha, serving as a jounin? He'd have others to look after him. People he trusted. Friends. Friends aren't a substitute for family. Is that me regressing again, or do I actually have a shred of wisdom now? I'm not suggesting that they are. I'm only saying that in this situation, you're Naruto's center. He hasn't made any other connections, and he won't as long as he stays here. Asuma sighed. Can we discuss at my home? I don't want to stand in a hospital discussing my son's future. Are you ready to leave already? Asuma rolled his shoulders. It's been 2 days. The medic said the poison was extracted from my system. Whether I sleep here or at home won't make any difference in my recovery at this point. And Naruto should be at home right now. I don't want him sleeping here, or spending the night without me at home. Chiriku only nodded. Then get dressed, take Naruto, and we'll talk. This brings back pleasant memories, Asuma set the 2 cups of tea on the table. He prepared it after he'd eaten most of what was left in the refrigerator, only feeling comfortable after Chiriku had insisted that he should sate himself before their conversation. Chiriku only sipped his tea without comment. It wasn't as though Asuma was trying to compensate for discomfort, but I'm not going to dwell on your neglect of your injury. It's not something I would have expected from you, but oversights do happen. Asuma blinked behind his own glass. A reprimand, but nothing like he'd been expecting. What's more important is whether or not you're going to be able to perform in your current situation. Just say Naruto. Chirika nodded. Yes. You're right. Naruto. He saw his father on the brink of death, and you know what that did to him. Are you going to be able to focus properly from now on? I swore to serve the daimyo in any capacity. Words don't mean anything unless they have resolve behind them. Asuma, I don't doubt your loyalty, but right now, and in the future, I think we both know that the safety and well-being of your son is going to take priority over anything else. You're not going to be able to take the same calculated risks you did before. Caution has its merits, but there are limits. I'm aware. Asuma's voice came out strained. He kept himself in check by gripping the edge of the table. He's my son. He relaxed his grip. Is that why you hesitated to kill him, father? Did that same feeling of implicit self-interest spark within you? I'm not going to abandon my son, nor am I going to turn my back on the duty that I promised to fulfill. Asuma, at this stage they're mutually exclusive. I know you. You're going to focus on training Naruto more than ever. He'll occupy your mind constantly, even on missions. He did before. Not to this extent, I'll wager. Yes, you knew that there was the possibility that you might be injured, might even die. But just as a fresh academy recruit knows about those two paths, it was only theory. You hadn't seen its effects firsthand. In Konoha, people with children still perform their duty. He knew it was a hollow argument before he voiced it. Couples usually rotate. They have family to watch after their child. Friends. There's more than one person, Asuma. His tone grew quieter. You should know this. And if I said that I thought I could function normally even now? I'd tell you that you're lying to yourself. They sat in silence then. Chiriku drank from his cup at regular intervals. Asuma took a few deep swallows to empty his own before setting it down with barely a clack. All he could really make out was the sound of Russell's leaves and branches outsides. A nice afternoon. So this is what I get for suddenly deciding to take an interest in something? He winced. That sounded childish and he knew it. But he could still be of some use. The poison. It had to be connected to Suna somehow. Even that was tentative, now that he thought of it. What do you think I should do then? I'm asking you as student to teacher, or however you want to view it. Friend to friend would be more appropriate, I think. He'd also drained his cup, by the sound it made when it hit the wood. I'm not suggesting you return to Konoha. It's too early for that. I think Naruto can learn a great deal while outside of Konoha. Something else tugged at Asuma's thoughts. Why did you let me train under you? I've had Naruto with me since the beginning. Why let me join the Guardians? Chirika seemed to consider for a moment. It was a risk. I admit that. You had an excellent record, enormous potential, and your disagreements with your father aside, your reasons were convincing. But I knew this would come eventually. Either you or Naruto would be placed in danger, and from then on, things would be different. Now he wanted a cigarette for no other reason than to blow smoke as a kind of prop to punctuate his thinking. All right. I'll take that for now, even if I don't think that's all there is to it. If not to Konoha, where? Nothing prevents you from staying here, Asuma. You can train Naruto for as long as you like, and you have enough experience to coordinate efforts from a distance. I'd rather address the issue with this poison. What conclusions have you come to? Did the medic tell you what the poison was? Chirika nodded. Well, at first I thought someone had diluted the poison just so it would act over the course of a day, but now, it's obvious it was thickened, I suppose is the term. There aren't many people who still specialize in poisons to that extent, that they can create something so subtle and effective. You suspect Suna then? It's what I have to go on. I could be wrong. Daichi was poisoned by something from Suna. He paused. And now thinking of that, that poison wasn't exactly easy to neutralize. From what I understand, it takes a while for the body to metabolize chemicals like that, and we picked Daichi up just a little more than a day after he'd been captured. Frankly, I think someone regulated the concentration and dosage of poison precisely enough so as not to kill him. Whoever did it wouldn't even have needed to come up with an antidote before we found him, if they wanted to keep him alive. Chirika smiled. And you thought you wouldn't be able to contribute anything, HM? But when we found Daichi, he was still suffering from the effects of the poison. The medic I spoke with claimed that they came up with something that neutralized the toxin. Asuma said. It's possible that the poison was diluted enough so that we'd be able to work quickly enough. From what I understand, there are ways to accelerate the processing of chemicals like that in the body. He smiled. I've qualified every one of these assertions with a grain of doubt. My whole line of thought could be wrong. We won't know until we investigate further. Chirika placed his palm over the mouth of the cup. I had the medic isolate the chemical that was extracted from your body. They only know that it's a stimulant. So they told me? He chuckled. It's a shame we don't have Tsunade on call for us. Chirika smiled. You do catch on quickly, as always. Asuma stared at him. Chiriku, I was joking. No one even knows where Tsunade is right now. He paused. Well, that's not entirely true. There were rumors of a healer wandering the fringe towns on the border of the Fire Country, but he never pursued them. Finding her, however, might prove to be a boon for your line of thought, and this would serve as a low-risk mission for you to carry out for the Guardians, and it would give Naruto a chance to expand his view of the world. Asuma had folded his hands and rested his chin on them. Another artifact from Father's office. That's thin, Chirika. That's very, very thin. Even if I found her, it's very likely that she'd tell me to get lost. From what my father told me, she didn't leave Konoha on the best of terms. Not as bad as that other bastard, but that's not saying very much. Do we even need the Sannin anymore? He cleared his throat. And are the medics here so inept that they can't figure out what they have on their hands? None of them have experience from the Second Shinobi War, and none of them are as nearly as proficient as Tsunade in any aspect of the medical field. Asuma sighed. And I'd have Naruto with me. Are you hoping that a cute 5-year-old can convince her to help us? It's not a thought that crossed my mind, but since you mention it, that might have some merit. He sighed again, the sound grating on even his own nerves. I'll consider it. But it's not something I'm going to rush into. I want at least a month with Naruto to train him uninterrupted. And I'm thinking of calling Jiraiya in to examine his seal and make sure that his chakra control is up to par. I also understand that Tsunade is quite proficient with sealing herself. Asuma blinked. You're not seriously considering the possibility that she'd agree to teach Naruto anything? Directly, no. But you shouldn't feel as though Jiraiya is the only one who can understand Naruto's seal. Probably not, but right now he's in the best position. And my decision to spend time training him still stands. As you wish. Seeking her out does provide you with a good opportunity to continue to serve in a relatively low-risk capacity. Asuma rolled his eyes. Well, when you put it that way, I may as well take up a few D-rank missions along the way too. Whose garden needs weeding? Asuma. He sounded more exasperated than anything else. Right. I'm sorry. I'm just tired all over again, I suppose. It seems no matter how much I sleep, I can't rest. You're a shinobi. You're not supposed to rest until you can no longer draw a breath. And Naruto thinks my blade is beautiful. Asuma dodged a blow without lifting a foot. You're overextending yourself, Naruto. His son broke his stance and looked at him, confusion relaxing his previously focused features. When you punch, you shouldn't extend your entire arm. It wastes movement and leaves you more vulnerable to a counterattack. He went into a fighting stance, the back of his left foot facing the side of his right. He snapped out a few quick blows against the air, following them up with a slow, step-by-step demonstration. The faster your blows, the more impact they'll have. It's called impulse. He paused, Naruto's expression not really indicating anything one way or the other. Naruto, if you were to fall from a tree, would you rather land on the ground, or on your mattress? My mattress. His response was automatic. Why? He frowned. It would hurt less. Asuma smiled. I know. But do you know why? Well, the mattress is soft, and the ground is hard. When I fall on the mattress, he frowned again, moving his open hands away from each other. Asuma nodded. You get the general idea. You're right, the mattress is soft. It increases the amount of time that it takes for you to fall. It spreads your fall out, if you want to think of it that way. That's the same reason for padded clothing. It spreads the blows of someone's hands and feet out. So. And Asuma turned and walked to a tree. He formed a fist and landed a few one-knuckled punches against the bark, his hand moving so fast Naruto could only see a blur of motion. His eyes widened when he looked at the tree again, where the bark was deeply cracked in 5 places. That's so cool. Will you teach me how to do that, Dad? Asuma laughed. I am. Just be patient. He looked at his handiwork. That would work better on Brick, actually. But Brick is Naruto caught himself before blurting out. He'd been watching his words more carefully recently. It's hard, But trees don't break when you drop them, I guess. He looked to Asuma, who nodded. Brick is brittle. It's not flexible. Take a fresh tree branch and try to break it. You won't be able to do it, even if you're very strong. Yeah. I have to pull it and stretch it, and even then it doesn't really break. Right. The human body is very elastic. Squishy, I guess you could say. When you hit someone in the stomach, the skin and muscles stretch, and take some of the blow. If someone trips, it's unlikely they'll be severely injured, but drop a brick from the same height. It'll break. Naruto finished, nodding. Now, why don't you try and hit me again? He got into a fighting stance. They continued like that for another hour, with Asuma occasionally stopping to correct Naruto's stance and the direction of his blows. He was wasting less energy. He'd stopped extending his elbow fully, and his kicks were made using his knee as a pointer to hit the target. Not that they ever did, though Asuma was surprised that he had to move his arms to defend himself at a few points. Naruto was more agile than he'd given him credit for. By the end of the hour, Naruto was sweating, but he looked no worse for wear. He's going to be a monster when he learns to properly tap and control his chakra. He waited for some sense of foreboding or even revulsion, but neither came. That's my son. He smiled softly, still getting lasting pleasure from the thought. That was good. He earned a grin. But, and that tempered the expression, you still need to work on your positioning. Try coming at me from behind. Aim for lower points on my body. It's more difficult for me to defend myself from an attack like that. When you're fighting a large opponent, remember that their reach is long, but their recovery is worse than yours. All right. Naruto nodded, getting into a stance again. Asuma raised his hand. That's enough taijutsu for now. We're going to focus on chakra access and control. Naruto perked up even more. Yeah. You'll teach me ninjutsu, right? One step at a time, Naruto. You need to learn to mold and control your chakra before you can so much as bend a blade of grass without using your hand. Though that's more or less what you'll be doing for a while anyway. He regarded Naruto for a moment. Churka had told him that he'd sensed a very brief flash of foreign chakra after he'd passed out, and Naruto had started to panic, but it had been snuffed out almost instantly, like a match in a gale. The seal must have activated. Naruto apparently had no memory of the incident, something which Asuma found to be a bit too convenient. I suppose he wasn't called a genius for nothing. You told me you practiced on your own, and you can draw out your chakra at will now, right? Naruto nodded, placing his palms together and closing his eyes. His face scrunched around his eyes and nose, and it seemed like he was about to open his mouth and speak, and then. Asuma felt small prickles on his skin, up and down his neck at first, then on his hands, his arms. Tiny sensations, lighter than insects, that slowly spread until his hands tingled. He supposed if he hadn't been concentrating on it, he wouldn't have felt anything, but he was, and it was there. And to think he's so young and I can feel it coming off of him. Very good. You can draw on your chakra, but that's only part of what you need to be able to do if you want to use ninjutsu. Naruto opened his eyes and the pinpricks vanished. Hand seals, right? His voice was eager. Eventually, yes. But hand seals won't do you any good if you can't control your power. He knelt and picked a leaf from the ground. Huh? Naruto regarded him with confusion. I want you to try to split this leaf with your chakra. What? That's it. He looked like Asuma had asked him to memorize a stock report for fun. If you can master this exercise, your control will be at a level where you can start learning techniques. Naruto's expression became neutral. He huffed, fine. He held out his hand and Asuma gave him the leaf. Split the leaf in half, right? Asuma nodded. Using only your chakra. He paused. Don't hurt yourself. Ha! Naruto sat on the grass, looking at the leaf like a dog had just drooled on his hand. You should probably concentrate just a little bit. Naruto huffed again, closing his eyes. Asuma waited. He didn't feel the prickling, which meant Naruto was trying to draw out a smaller amount than before. Is he trying to turn it into a specific shape, or is he just focusing on wedging energy in the center and making it expand? Asuma had himself sliced the leaf cleanly in half with what he'd envisioned to be a knife, but given his affinity, that wasn't surprising. I wonder. Gah! Asuma felt the pinpricks before he heard the yell. Naruto turned around, grinning and rubbing the back of his head. Does this count? The leaf lay in shreds all around his hand. Asuma sighed. No. I can't say it does. Naruto rubbed his hand on his pants and picked up another leaf. Drawing a breath, he narrowed his eyes and fell silent again. Asuma resumed waiting, only to have his thoughts interrupted minutes later after Naruto had managed to make the leaf shrivel in on itself. Just like my knife. Naruto muttered and found another leaf. This time he flattened the leaf against his palm to the point that he had to peel it off his skin. The destruction of foliage went on for 10 more leaves, Naruto becoming increasingly irritated until on the 10th time he released his chakra in one burst, making Asuma's face and arms feel as though they'd fallen asleep. Needless to say, the leaf didn't survive the outburst. Naruto, what are you thinking about when you're trying to split the leaf? What do you mean? I mean, are you thinking of a shape? A knife? A fissure down a path? Naruto frowned. Not much, I guess. I just sort of think of the leaf ripping apart, and I try to slowly draw on the chakra. Ah. Don't think of it as ripping. Splitting, Naruto. Ripping is more violent, less precise. You mean the words have something to do with it? The imagery associated with the words. The visual meaning does, yes. He smiled then. You like writing, right? You mean characters? He nodded eagerly. Yeah, I'm good at that. Remind me to get you more pens and better paper. For right now, I want you to think of a short, very thin blade as you focus your chakra. Keep that image in your mind as you draw on it, and push it towards the center of the leaf as slowly as you can while still maintaining control. Do you think you can do that? Of course. He found another leaf and resumed his stance of concentration. Asuma watched with more interest, leaning forward even though he could see fine from his normal vantage point. Minutes passed. Nothing. A breeze picked up, light and warm, but Naruto didn't break his focus. I wonder if that patience is for his audience, or himself? Naruto's hand twitched. Asuma let the motion pass. The twitch came again, more pronounced. Asuma focused on the hand. He thought a minute passed before his whole hand started to tremble. Naruto bit his lip, his brow furrowing even more deeply. He let out a tight, hissing breath, his fingers curling and angling, trembling all the while. Naruto Asuma's words were cut off by a sharp, short shake of his son's head. If anything, his whole body had contorted farther, twisting, tightening, a cord, a tourniquet. The muscles of his body seemed ready to quake collectively when Naruto released a long, strained breath, relaxing by infinitesimal steps. Asuma looked to leaf. It was splitting, an agonizing bifurcation traveling along its stem, moving up, up, up. Naruto grit his teeth and shook his hand before falling back and sprawling onto the grass. You had it. Asuma didn't bother keeping the pride from his voice. Yeah, but it was so he shook his whole body, almost out of disgust. It felt like your whole body was about to snap into pieces, right? Yeah? What's that about? Distilling your chakra into so precise a form is extremely difficult, especially for someone your age. I'm surprised you were able to do it, actually. What? You mean you thought I'd fail? He sounded indignant, hurt almost. Yes, but only because it's so difficult. I'm not going to give you pushover tasks, but I'm also not going to tell you something is easy when I know it isn't. Oh. Naruto still sounded sullen. He almost split it. It took a lot out of him, but it was a clean cut. He had to stop from grinning. It was barely a shape, not nature, and I'll have to wait a bit to test him, but it will make things much more interesting. Asuma ruffled his hair. Come on, Naru. You should know by now that it's better to work hard at something than just do easy stuff. I guess. He looked uncertain then. But you're proud of me, right, Dad? Very. And if you keep working hard, in a few weeks, well, we might even start on some seals and basic ninjutsu. Yeah. He pumped his fist before hugging Asuma around the waist. I'll make you proud. You will. Asuma stated it as a fact, a challenge almost. Just half a month left before Chiriku wants an answer. He looked over at Naruto, who looked happily lost in the afterglow of his accomplishments. I could train him on the road, but we'd be exposed. He looked around, the mountains a wall of stone and snow and ice. But then I almost died in my own house surrounded by those I consider my allies. That's a shinobi's life. I'll make sure you can survive that life. He placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, returning the smile he received. And I'll make you proud to call me your father. The face rose from the shadows like that of a bloated corpse from the turgid waters of a lake, pale and cold, and unthinking. Where there should have been eyes, there were only holes punched through the white exterior, receding like tunnels into what seemed an impossible depth. Its mouth, only a thin, unmoving line, indicated no more life than its hollowed eyes as the face leaned forward, seemingly suspended without a body in the branches. Monster. Naruto's body seized as he glimpsed the face from behind him. He thought he'd cried out, but his voice had escaped as only a broken creak. He wanted to turn his head away, but the sight held him there, like it held his legs, and he could only make his eyes dart back and forth as if to make the creature think that he hadn't actually seen it peering at him from the tree. It's he swallowed, his mind not processing the scene properly. The light glinted off the face, glaring into his eye. He felt tears start to form as his vision blurred. If I close my eyes, I don't know what it'll do. He squeezed the skin around his eyes. They watered, and thick droplets rolling down his cheeks. His vision cleared, and the face was gone. Naruto exhaled. His heart still beat wildly in his chest, and he could feel the dampness under his arms and around his neck. A bird called, launching itself from a branch, causing Naruto to snap from his trance. He broke into a run, the ground soft beneath his feet from the previous night's rain. Behind me. What if it's behind me? He grit his teeth and forced his thoughts to connect with his body, jerking his head around to see only the empty tree. Good. He looked in front, his head flicking right then left as he went. A shinobi is always aware of everything around him. And he probably doesn't just stand there like an idiot when something scares him. The thought came to him like a bitter taste, causing his face to heat and his stomach to clench. Stupid. He reached the house and slowed, placing his palm against the smooth, cool wall. His heart beat faster, but the exertion of his body felt good, refreshing almost, as though he'd worn away the buildup of heavy anxiety in his body. Dad. I'll tell Dad. He moved but stopped. What would he say? That he'd seen a face in the trees, he'd blinked and it had vanished? That didn't make sense. Monster. The word whispered in his mind, and he shuddered. No. If there was something wrong in the temple, he should tell his father. A white face. Hollow eyes. Frozen mouth. It sounded so stupid now that he repeated it back to himself. Naruto heard voices as he approached the door. His father's, and he frowned in concentration. It was a man's voice. Not Chiriku's, or his father's other teammates. He pushed the door open. If it wasn't any of those, then maybe it was someone new. He paused, another unpleasant thought forming in his head. I'll have to find out then. Asuma sat at the table, a wide, shallow cup resting between two of his fingers. He nodded and turned to look at Naruto, a smile shaping his features before his face turned serious. Naruto, did something happen? He stood and walked to his son. So it's that white-haired guy. He hadn't really given the man much thought when he'd first appeared, bumbling around and shouting his name like was the greatest man alive. Now that Naruto thought about it, he had said something like that. He'd had such a ridiculous expression on his face that Naruto didn't even consider taking him seriously, and his father. Naruto? Oh. He bit his lip. I saw a monster in the tree. I finished my reading. It almost sounded like a question. Asuma looked surprised. That's good. But you don't have your book or map with you. What happened? The white-haired man looked at Naruto as well, turning in his chair, an impassive expression on his face. Why is this so hard? Just pretend it's like one of Dad's missions and he has to say what happened. I saw something in a tree. Stupid. But Asuma didn't seem to think so. His face shifted into an expression that Naruto had to admit frightened him a little. If it wasn't Dad, I'd probably be running from him just like the face. Asuma knelt down, his features softening into worry. What did you see, Naruto? He swallowed. A face. A white face. Asuma frowned. A white face? Do you mean a pale face? No. I mean it was white. Like a bowl. And it didn't have eyes. Just black holes. And it looked like its mouth was painted on. Now the white-haired man stood up. His face looked on the verge of mimicking the one Asuma had had only moments ago. Was it actually a monster then? Naruto felt his heart pick up again. Naruto, did this face look like any kind of animal that you've ever seen before? He blinked. Did it? He couldn't really remember that well. All he saw, surfacing in his memory, were the voids of the eyes and the still, thin mouth. I don't remember. He looked back and forth between the two men, hoping one of them would be able to put his words into something that made sense. Asuma sighed, placing his hand on Naruto's shoulder. It's all right, Naruto. What you saw was a shinobi. Then his eyes widened. It was just a mask. He felt his face burn and he looked down. Stupid. I couldn't even figure that out. Asuma again seemed to disagree with his opinions. Naruto, look at me. He raised his head and saw his father smiling. Isn't it bad that your son can't tell a mask from a real face? It's all right that you were frightened. I was scared when I saw my first ANBU without knowing what they were. Umbu? He was scared of that. Naruto couldn't picture his father fearing another man. He's scared when I'm in trouble. He was scared at the hospital, but he's never been scared of someone. Maybe ninja can learn from being afraid sometimes. Naruto. His father's voice drew him back. The ANBU are a group of special shinobi from Konoha. Their purpose is to gather information by spying on people and groups of people. He paused, seeming to consider something. He exhaled. Mainly, though, their job is to kill people. Naruto stared at him, his voice failing yet again. So, was he trying to kill me? No. I'd be dead already. It surprised him how easily he could think that. He knew that sometimes shinobi had to kill people. His father had told him that the first time he'd asked what ninja did. But who would want to do only that? Then they were here to spy on me? The second case seemed almost as bad. Asuma nodded. So it would seem. He turned. What do you think, Jiraiya? Jiraiya. That's his name. I haven't heard anything about ANBU being issued to observe Naruto, though I can't say I'm really surprised. The third is nothing if not cautious. You mean it was grandfather? Naruto knew the word, but it didn't mean anything to him. He just pictured an older version of Asuma and kept it in his head whenever Hiruzen was mentioned. Jiraiya chuckled. Grandfather? He'd love to hear that. As though he needs two boys reminding him that he's old. Asuma just nodded. It's possible that he sent someone to watch over Naruto. It's also possible he did it just to keep the council quiet. Naruto frowned. Two? He would have voiced his confusion, but something troubled him more. Why would they want to spy on me? What did I do? You didn't do anything, Naruto. Just remember that sometimes things happen to people, and they can't control how others react to them because of that. His father sounded out again, like he had right before he'd given Naruto the map of the world, so he could know all the nations and their lands. He'd said the borders were carved from blood and with steel. And he'd sounded sad. But now, Naruto couldn't place the second tone. It was different. Almost nice. He smiled. So, there's nothing wrong with me? He shook his head. No. He made a noise in the back of his throat. Although, it's troubling that a shinobi was able to watch you for so long without either of us knowing. We can take precautions against that. There are ways to alert us if his chakra is disturbed by a foreign one. Asuma nodded. I'm going to write to my father and ask about this. I don't like the idea that we're being spied on. If he didn't tell you about it in his letters, I doubt he'll tell you all the details now. He will if I ask him. When he was teaching you, didn't he always tell you the truth if you asked? Jiraiya considered the words. He did, although there's a difference between lying and concealing information. Naruto was getting frustrated. But I still don't understand. What would an ANBU want with me? Asuma didn't speak right away. He removed a cigarette from his pack, twirling it between his fingers. How much did you read of the book I gave you? Naruto frowned before making a face. He didn't know what father really expected of him, giving him that stupid book. He didn't even know half the words in it yet, but that didn't seem to matter. Asuma had given him paper and ink and told him to write down whatever words he didn't know, and he had, filling up 10 sheets of paper in the first hour. It was nice, he admitted. Some of the characters were challenging enough that he wrote them down several times before he was satisfied with the outcome, and he oftentimes wrote them even more just so he could commit them to memory. He had a suspicion his father didn't really expect him to read and understand the book. He actually expected him to not understand it. You should know. I gave you the sheets and just reread the same few pages. His frown deepened. I don't like that book. His father smiled. It'll be useful. Just trust me on that. Humph. Jiraiya cleared his throat. What is this extremely useful book about? Asuma turned again. History. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Trust you to try to cram that down his throat. It's something everyone should know, especially a shinobi. At 5? Asuma ignored him. And the scrolls? I read them all. He paused. The book didn't say much about the tailed beasts. They'd been much easier than the book. He'd even managed to find a mistake in one of the sentences, and that made him feel far more accomplished than he did now. Easy things are fine, but difficult things force you to become better. He wouldn't argue with his father on that point. They talked more about chakra and chakra control, at least the first two had. Seeing his progress basically spelled out before him had given rise to another burst of pride. He now regarded the scroll as a kind of marker of what he'd managed to accomplish. The last scroll had been something totally different, something he'd flipped through that book for over an hour to find a few more scraps of information. Tailed beasts. They sounded like something out of mythology. Beings made of chakra. Towering and powerful, they have the ability to level cities with a flick of their bodies. And do you remember what you read about the Kyuubi? His father looked at him, almost expectantly. Naruto spoke slowly, as though measuring his steps before a difficult taijutsu exercise. Kyuubi no Yuko. The most powerful of them all. It attacked Konoha, but was sealed before it could destroy the village. Naruto brought the characters of the creature's name into his mind, mentally tracing them out in their proper order. MHM, that's correct. Asuma had stood, picking Naruto up and letting him sit on the table. It was better than standing. Naruto kicked his legs. And I read that the tailed beasts were sealed into people. They're big, so that means that it's ninjutsu. No. It's called Fuinjutsu. They're called Jin. He paused and frowned. He knew the word in his head, but he couldn't form it out loud quickly. The Jinchuriki, Naruto nodded, are what the people with tailed beasts sealed in them are. His father nodded just as Jiraiya interrupted. Asuma, did you want me to give my opinion now, or would you prefer to wait? His father's expression became irritated. You should ask Naruto. He's the one who's going to be examined. Naruto frowned. What's Dad talking about? Dad, is something wrong with me? Asuma shook his head, placing his hand on Naruto's shoulder. No. Jiraiya is just going to examine your chakra system and make sure that it's functioning properly. You read the chakra scrolls, so you know how it looks, in general. Naruto wasn't very much relieved, but he answered the question anyway. Yeah. It sort of looks like pipes. That's right. So we're going to make sure that the chakra is circulating properly in those pipes. Naruto felt a twinge of apprehension. What if something's wrong? What if I'll never be able to do any ninjutsu? Maybe that's why I couldn't cut the leaf. Even if something's wrong, we'll work out a way to fix it. You don't have to worry about that. But you'll tell me, right? If something's wrong? Of course. I'd never keep something like that from you. Naruto's eyes flickered to Jiraiya. He still looked unsure about something. He probably knows something Dad doesn't, and he's trying to hide it. Dad wouldn't lie to me. He said so. You can't do this? He eyed Jiraiya. There wasn't anything particularly wrong with him, but he made his father seem uncomfortable at times. Jiraiya is much more experienced with this sort of thing than I am. He's quite good at examining chakra flow, and at sealing. His father seemed to place emphasis on the last word. What does this have to do with sealing? Jinchuriki. He shook his head, looking first to his father, then Jiraiya. Are you ready, Naruto? Jiraiya's voice sounded nice enough. He swallowed and nodded. Yeah. His hands gripped the edge of the table in spite of his steady voice. Lift up your shirt and lie back. Naruto hesitated for a moment, but eventually pulled up the fabric, the skin on his stomach prickling as it was hit by cool air. He tensed his back as he felt the equally cool surface of the table. Jiraiya moved to stand over Naruto, looming over him like a pale statue. Naruto swallowed and held his breath and so it wouldn't catch. He kept his eyes fixed on some unobstructed part of the ceiling, then let them dart towards the window, watching the light spread up the wall and across the floor. His fingers scrapped across the wood as Jiraiya's face drew closer. Raising his head slightly, all he could see was the mane of white. He lowered his head and swallowed again. It's not so bad. I can deal with this. But what is he looking for on my stomach? Dad, why would someone want to be a Jinchuriki? It's not something people really volunteer for. There was that tone in his father's voice that he couldn't place. It has something to do with me. Something happened, or I did something and that's why he left Konoha. So, they force people to become like that? Asuma, is this the time for this conversation? Jiraiya didn't lift his head. Nothing's going to happen. They're talking like I'm not here. Naruto shifted a bit to make his back more comfortable. Naruto, the scrolls I gave you weren't very detailed. That's partially because not much is known about the tailed beasts, but also because most of what we know isn't written down. Naruto frowned. Is it because the other villages don't want people to know about their Jinchuriki? Yes, that's what it boils down to. The words, conflicting interests from the book came back to Naruto in a flash. His response caught in his throat as he felt the tips of Jiraiya's fingers press against the center of his stomach. Asuma put a hand on his shoulder. Just relax, Naruto. Okay. Relax. Yeah. Dad would be calm. Conflicting interests. It's like when Dad and I can't agree on something. Is Konoha better than the other villages? Jiraiya stilled for an instant. Naruto thought it was something he found, and he looked up to Asuma, who squeezed his shoulder. No. I can't say it's better in any way that's provable. All I can say is that I consider Konoha to be the closest thing to a home I have, so I would choose it over any of the other villages. So, if you'd been born in Suna, you'd think it was better? Probably. We fought Suna very bitterly in the Second Shinobi War, so many people still hold a grudge, and consider Konoha superior simply on the basis of what they lost. Suna feels the same way about us. So they all kill people, Naruto muttered the words, like he was trying to test what they meant to him. Is that why Dad left Konoha? Naruto felt something flowing beneath his skin, cool and quick. He squirmed under the feeling, and it vanished as suddenly as it had arrived. I can't deny that, Naruto. The hidden villages all look after their own interests, and oftentimes that means killing people, even if it's not out in the open. Most of the time, a shinobi will be given a task that's less than pleasant. And you've done things like that, right? He knew the answer, but he wanted it voiced. I have. It's part of what being a shinobi means. What being his father's face, pale and sweaty, his eyes have open and like glass. He wasn't breathing. He didn't move, Naruto's breath caught sharply. He didn't cry. For the first time since that event, its memory didn't reduce him to tears. And that's why someone tried to kill you, right? He kept his voice steady, even though he knew his mouth trembled. Asuma cleared his throat. Yes. There are other shinobi, who work for groups that oppose the Fire Country, not just Konoha, and they conduct the same kinds of hidden missions that we do. I wouldn't quite put it that way. Jiraiya's voice came out low and quiet. In the end, people still die. More lives might be saved, but that intermediate step is almost always unavoidable. And that's the point. Jiraiya moved away from Naruto's stomach, motioning him to sit up. He did so and pulled his shirt down, rubbing his hand along his stomach to warm it up. He turned to his father. His expression was calm, bored almost, the unlit cigarette between his teeth as a kind of accent to his outlook. Maybe, but Konoha still has blood on its hands, just like every other hidden village. It's better to realize that sooner rather than later. Jiraiya grunted. Just make sure you don't paint the leaf out to be worse than it actually is. Whether or not the leaf warrants my opinion of it is up to Naruto to decide. And he will, eventually. They're still talking like I'm not here. Naruto resisted the urge to pout. That's another reason the Jinchuriki are kept under scrutiny. A hidden village with a tailed beast is less likely to be attacked. So it's like a protector? Asuma sighed. I can't really say that's true. It's a threat. Nothing more. If that threat saves lives, then it's effective. Recalling his father's fearsome expression, Naruto could understand the effectiveness of using fear. But then they just choose someone so they can be stronger. Is it really to protect people? It seemed selfish, but if it worked like his father had said. Jiraiya interrupted again, clearing his throat and grabbing Naruto's attention. Your chakra system is fine, if a bit constricted. He seemed unsatisfied with his ability to describe his findings. It's not like I wouldn't be able to understand it. You mean like a spring? He recalled his father's demonstration of compressing and relaxing the winding metal using his chakra alone. Jiraiya paused, seemingly surprised. Yes. You could think of it like that. You have a large amount of chakra for someone your age, and as you grow, your chakra system grows with you. You can picture your main chakra coil as a spring. He nodded, as though tucking the analogy away for further use. Asuma stepped next to him. And you remember what happens when a spring is very stiff, right? Naruto nodded slowly. Yeah. It's hard to stretch and push down on. Though his father didn't seem to have much trouble. Asuma nodded. Even though your chakra coils are large for someone your age, the amount of chakra you have access to means that they become very densely packed. It's difficult for the coils to expand or contract, and for your chakra to flow as effectively. Does that mean I won't be able to finish the leaf exercise? If something happened, Dad said he could fix it. You'll be able to, it will just take more time. Naruto breathed out, his body relaxing again. He could handle hard work. How far has he gotten in slicing the leaf? Jiraiya sounded interested for the first time. He can collapse his chakra into the shape of a small blade. He can't maintain it for very long, but he's managed to make a clean, deep cut about a third of the way up the stem. Jiraiya nodded. So you can move it well enough without its form blurring or the edge becoming distorted. He seemed to speak past Naruto. No wonder Dad doesn't like this guy hanging around. He crossed his arms. I'm bringing this up before it's relevant, but have you tested Naruto for nature affinities? You mean I could have one already? He turned to his father, hoping for confirmation. He received only a thoughtful look. Jiraiya conceded. Most people have some kind of affinity, though it's difficult to master and doesn't usually show up until later on. Do you have one, Dad? Wind and fire. You can have two? The prospects were sounding better and better. In theory, you can develop proficiency in all five, but that's only in theory, and it takes years of practice, decades sometimes, just to master one. It's faster if you have an affinity, but it's by no means easy. Can you test me now? Asuma glanced at Jiraiya, but the look on the man's face didn't reveal his opinion one way or the other. Naruto kept looking between the two of them, his feet kicking impatiently. Come on, Dad. Please say yes. After you've mastered the leaf exercise. Oh. Naruto's mood dropped a little, but he was still excited. I'll do it. Then I can move on to real stuff. Naruto decided his father must have been a mind reader when he spoke. Don't rush through your chakra control exercises, Naruto. Doing that is like trying to run before you can stand. Jiraiya added his agreement. There are no shortcuts, kid. Naruto pouted at the diminutive address. Not even Dad calls me that. But you said it would be more difficult for me since my chakra coils are compressed. Do you know how much longer? You're close to mastering the exercise, Naruto. In another few weeks, you should have more than enough control over your chakra to start learning ninjutsu. That was the magic word for Naruto, and he smiled brightly. If I learn ninjutsu, I can call myself a shinobi, and I'll be able to help Dad. He stopped, looking at his father. But he doesn't seem to want to go back to Konoha that badly. What will I do once he's finished here? He'd never thought much about why he wanted to master ninjutsu and taijutsu. If he did, he'd... Dad, what if I don't want to do missions after I learn ninjutsu? What if I just want to learn it? For the sake of it? He looked to Jiraiya. He might be taking a leaf out of your book. I'm flattered. Naruto fidgeted. Well, I guess. I mean, I want to know it. I want to be able to control my chakra and protect myself. Yeah. He couldn't let his father do that forever. He couldn't always just run every time he saw something like an ANBU. To his relief, Asuma seemed pleased with his line of thought. You don't have to make any decision about what you want to do with your skills now, Naruto. He paused. Just don't forget that your affiliation with Konoha means that it's the village which will most easily accept you. Naruto nodded. If it's Dad's home, then I guess it also counts as mine. What's our clan symbol? Asuma looked surprised. Haven't I ever shown that to you before? No. I'll have to go dig it out of my room then. He stood and walked from the room, leaving Naruto and Jiraiya alone. He kicked his legs, looking at the floor. After deciding on his thoughts, he looked up. What's so bad about the Jinchuriki? Dad had told him never to let the conversation go into what Naruto thought of as a fidgeting silence. Jiraiya looked surprised. Nothing. I never said anything against them. Now he looked uncomfortable. But you didn't want my dad talking to them about me, or at least you didn't like it when he said anything about them to me. The man paused and seemed to consider his situation. Your father seems to be set on telling you something, or at least on having you reach a conclusion. That's not something I'm in a position to do on my own, since you're not my son. His frown deepened as he said the last words. Dad wants me to know something? About the Jinchuriki, they can be sealed into people. The hidden villages use them to stop fighting. Jiraiya is a seal expert. Naruto felt a slow sensation of cold move up from his stomach. No. Dad hasn't said anything like that. He bit his lip and started kicking again, not noticing that Jiraiya had moved closer to him. Naruto. Are you alright? He felt a hand on his shoulder. It wasn't like his father's. There was something different about it. Not just the size, but the pressure, the heat. He didn't back away from it, but it didn't really do much to stop the feeling of cold spreading along his skin. I'm not sure. Naruto. And now he was facing Jiraiya, his face marked with concern and sympathy, and no matter what you're thinking, or what conclusion you come to, he exhaled deeply. Trust your father. Naruto nodded, his head moving as a reaction to the words. And you're good at seals? He threw the statement out, not really expecting an answer. I am. There was the concern in his voice again. They were sealed. Like the stuff put into scrolls. He didn't know anything else about sealing. He meant to ask his father? Dad wouldn't, he wouldn't lie. But he hadn't said anything at all, Naruto hadn't even asked. He said lots of stuff. He wants me to know. Naruto's eyes widened and he stared at the empty frame that his father filled moments later. His mouth quirked up and then back down a second later. He wants me to know. Naruto wiped the tear from his eye before it could even fall. He smiled at his father, but he didn't think he could have explained why. Jiraiya, what did? He's figuring out what you wanted him to know. I can look at the seal now, Dad. Seal. Maybe they call it that for a reason. He felt a numbness around his hands, as though they weren't really there. His smile had dwindled, but he didn't think he looked troubled. He just looked normal. Asuma didn't move to give him the cloth. Dad, can I please see it? He held his hands out. He half hoped his father would just embrace him, but he wanted to clutch the symbol just as badly. He trusts me with this too. Asuma obliged both his wishes. He placed his arm around his shoulders and drew him closer, the cloth spread out in the other hand. Naruto leaned forward to get a better look. The symbol appeared to be 3 crescents that overlapped near their tips. A half circle arose from the point of each intersection. Naruto was reminded of a sun rising over the horizon. He traced each moon with a finger. So this is the sign of my family. My dad's clan. My clan. He smiled, a small feeling of warmth battling against the cold spreading in him. He trusts me with this. Dad. His voice came out lower than he intended. It's me, isn't? Monster. He saw the mask, white and cold, flash in the sun, the thin line of its mouth a line of red. A fox mask. It was clear in his mind. And his father pulled him to his body. He felt the warmth, and he knew that the cloth with the symbol was still behind him, his father's hand clutching it. That's mine too. He closed his eyes and opened them again to see if his vision would blur, but it stayed steady. Monster. It came as whisper now. He could still make the mask out. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell me the truth. No. He never lied. He thought I could do it myself. Naruto closed his eyes again and drew the symbol to his mind. That's mine. He trusts me with it. Dad. He felt his body press tighter. Thank you? Asuma leaned back, taking a long, slow drag on his cigarette, expelling a wide stream of smoke through his mouth and nostrils. The time it took him to inhale and release the smoke gave the fog of debris a kind of weight that it normally would have lacked, and when he saw the tiny, glowing embers of tobacco dancing in the haze, he could almost claim that he was a creator of a small, self-contained world. Humph. That's poetic, isn't it? In truth, he hadn't smoked in over a month, and taking the time and effort to convince himself of its necessity on an arbitrary evening gave him a sense of leisure that he never previously felt from the moment he donned his forehead protector. And apparently taking it off doesn't actually remove its weight. Now he blew more smoke. His cigarettes were dry and heavily compacted, giving them their unique aroma and tendency to burn rapidly. If he'd wanted to, he could have ignited the cloud of particles in a flash of heat and light, creating a nice distraction. He looked at the letter he'd set next to him. A distraction would be nice right now. Depending on the answer he received, his life would get more complicated. Or less if he was to believe Chiriku. Wandering around Fire Country with Naruto, trying to find someone whose whereabouts were tied up only in rumors and his own instinct would qualify as a waste of time in the best of times, and potentially a critical misstep now. But he could use the exposure. And if we do find her, she might be a more reliable seal instructor than Jiraiya. Reducing the cigarette to a nub with one last drag, Asuma picked up the letter, the seal breaking as soon as his fingers touched it. My son. I'm happy to know that you're doing well, particularly after the shattered shuriken incident. I admit your last letter left me in a somewhat difficult situation. While your suspicions regarding the reasons for placing surveillance on the boy are mostly correct, you should know that I can't reveal the identity of the operatives. Rest assured, this is being done with my knowledge and direction, and there is no third party involved. I'm sorry for being sparse in this response, but I can assure you that I'll be sending more information through a very reliable source. I hope that you and your son are doing well, and that you'll keep me informed of any more developments. With love and regards. Your father. Asuma exhaled sharply as soon as he'd finished reading the letter, sparks coming dangerously close to forming and settling on the paper. He restrained the sharp spike of his chakra just in time. Trust the third to be cautious. That's who's speaking in this letter. He folded the paper and set it aside. Operatives. So there was more than one. Is he doing it just to keep those two quiet, or is he just as concerned? You won't be able to brush this aside if it becomes too inconvenient. He bit down on the stub between his teeth, his jaw tensing unpleasantly. Then he thought of Naruto wandering around with the black shirt and the white Sarutobi crest on the back, and he relaxed, smiling. Naruto had insisted on being allowed to do it himself, and Asuma had obliged, giving him the paper and ink. He'd drawn the symbol with the same skill and care that he wrote his characters. He has an unnatural amount of manual dexterity. Asuma examined his own large hands for a moment. He'd worked hard to train himself to the point where he could handle small objects with precision and make his writing legible. One less thing for him to worry about. Leaning back again, Asuma inhaled the cool air. He could still make out the lingering scent of his tobacco, and although most anyone else would find it unpleasant, the scent clung to the memories of his fondest evenings. My first success with fire release. Smoke mingled with burnt pine. He inhaled again. There was the pine smell, but it was fresh and clean, cool like the air. My first kiss. And she hadn't liked the taste of his mouth, so she told him he had to stop smoking whenever he wanted to kiss him. She'd liked the smell on his clothing though. She'd smelled like lilac. Her mother grew them. And she'd liked the smell of him in that moment in his training regiment, when the motions had started to exert his body. Light sweat in his hair. She'd liked his hair. Her hands in his hair, rubbing against his scalp, her mouth against her. He shook his head. There's no point in wallowing in that now. He sighed. And you're right in front of your house to boot. Naruto never even noticed that he doesn't have a mother. Does he realize he had one? The thought seemed so odd to him. A man and a woman. It's axiomatic. But to him, I'm enough. What does he think when he sees a woman in the street? But then, there were no other children around the temple, so any woman he saw would just be another person, like him. The difference is purely physical. If they traveled, Naruto would see other children with families, with mothers and fathers, and he'd inevitably ask the question. But he won't be able to miss something he never had. My own mother. Asuma paused. He didn't really have a clear recollection of his mother. She was there, of course, plainly tangible in his memory, but her personality was almost an overlay of his father's, something which was at once down to earth and yet infinitely distant with a sense of responsibility, whether contrived or otherwise. Did I even take the time to collect my closest memories of her on that day? No, I went straight to Naruto, and the moment I saw him, so small and lost to the world, I didn't even think of the others that had died. I went to the funeral. I stood next to my father. I set flowers on the stone. Asuma sat with his arms relaxed at his sides, taking in the sound, the smell, the feel of the evening while he thought. He felt nothing closely resembling what he should have felt. But what should I have felt? When children lost their parents, they were supposed to break down, to fall to their knees and weep and feel like an empty vessel. Kakashi had never spoken of what he'd felt when he'd found his father's body. Asuma could no more picture the man breaking down and weeping than he could force himself into a mold of expected behavior. Minato's death had weighed more heavily on him that day. He sighed. There was an old and now obscure pocket of philosophy in Wind Country which viewed bloodline connections as false paths that a person had to bypass in order to find their true course in life. My found son. He frowned. That translation wasn't very good, but then he never bothered to learn the dialects from that time and region very well. It's just the opposite of the fire sage's philosophy of an entangled, multiplied universe. There was no escaping a connection in that view. If Minato could see me raising his son now, would he be relieved, or some dual combination of that and a sharp jealousy? Asuma stood abruptly. He'd need alcohol and more cigarettes if he wanted to continue this train of thought, and he wasn't in the mood for the former, and wanted to keep cutting back on the latter. He picked up the letter and held it up to the moonlight. He didn't think his father would use such an obvious technique for embedding hidden information, if he'd bothered to do it at all. A very reliable source. Now he wondered how Jiraiya would feel about being made a messenger boy by his former sensei. Not that he has much of a choice. The thought amused him enough that he entered the house with a small smile on his face, which widened as he remembered the man's specialty in subterfuge. In a few days he wouldn't have to worry about Anbu looking over his shoulder. Naruto took the slip of paper into his hands eagerly, spreading it out on the grass in front of him and glancing back to his father for a brief nod of approval before he started his work. He dipped the brush into the well, glossy black droplets staining the blades as he moved to write. First he drew the symbol for fire, right in the center. Then the circle, but the square would work better first. Oh. Right, it doesn't matter before I pump in the chakra. He drew the square before inscribing the circle in it. That'll make it nice and big. Next came the corners. He placed diminutive fire symbols at all four, connecting opposite pairs with a line. Now it'll be fast, but I don't want it to. He paused, biting his lip. Oh. He smiled. Earth isn't the opposite of fire, but if it won't make fire travel easily. He looked trouble again. Dad said heat was the thermal? No, that's just another word for the same thing. And plain dirt was in he couldn't recall the word, but settled for connecting the smaller fire symbols to the square with elongated characters for Earth. And the short lines through it won't make it burn too slowly. He held up the finished piece for his father to see, a grin appearing on his face. I'm finished, Dad? Asuma leaned in to look at it. He was silent for several seconds before nodding. It looks good. He ran his thumb across his chin. Naruto made a face. Dad's face is getting hairier every day. He quickly forgot his dislike of facial hair and stood up. Can we test it now? Asuma smiled. Sure. But it'll be a bit difficult to use without an ignition sign. Huh? Naruto paused in his steps, looking down at his work. Oh. He smacked his forehead. Right. He ran back to his brush and ink. Making sure the top portion was dry, he turned it over and wrote a large earth character on the back, connecting it to the four corners. Okay. Now it's ready. Asuma merely nodded, handing his son a kunai and some string. Naruto tied the paper to the kunai and held it in front of him with both hands, his eyes narrowing in concentration as he drew on his chakra. It's best if right from the center the fire is touching everything, just like it should. All the energy will be split up and go to the four small fires. He examined his handiwork one last time before stepping back, making sure Asuma was next to him as he raised his hand to aim. The wind died down and the kunai flew, the note furling as it flew along its short trajectory. He heard the sound of metal sinking into the ground and held his breath. The paper fell to the side of the blade, listless. Come on, work. A breeze rose and the tag lifted, like a miniature kite, and then he heard the hissing, like water vaporizing on a hot surface. The corners ignited, the paper curling and shriveling, leaving gray ash until the fire enveloped the center, and Naruto squinted as the air ignited in a globe, the clap of air making him wince in spite of his elation. Too bright and noisy, but who cares? He turned to Asuma, jumping happily. I made it work in one try. My first seal, and it worked. Very good, Naruto. Though, that wasn't your first seal. Naruto calmed down for long enough to get his answer. When did I make a seal before? Just look at the back of your shirt. You mean the clan symbol? I poured my chakra into the drawing, sure, but that's a seal? If it's a seal, then what does it do? Asuma smiled. Well, the obvious thing is that it makes a white mark in the black cloth. There are other things, but you'll have to figure them out for yourself. Naruto nodded. I will. How well did I do with the explosion? Well, since the only instructions I gave you were make the paper blow up, you did very well. What made you use the earth symbols? You said that earth is, and he searched for the word again. Insulator, Asuma supplied. Heat can flow just like electricity, and can also be impeded. Metals thought, depending on the type, can be good thermal and electric conductors. His father looked thoughtful. Well, I think you have enough to work on right now. There's something else I can learn? He momentarily forgot about the singed ground. Asuma rubbed his chin again. There is, but it's a difficult subject, and it would take a great deal of your time. Once you've made more progress with sealing. And we still need to test you for elemental affinity. That diverted Naruto's attention again. Right after the leaf exercise, right? If I can make that explosion, why can't I cut a stupid leaf? That's what I promised. Asuma looked to where he'd thrown the kunai. It was a good first attempt. Nice and bright, and not so big that you might have been caught up in it. It would have knocked back and injured anyone caught in the radius. He thought for a moment. What made you put the smaller fire symbols at the corners? It seemed obvious to Naruto, but he explained anyway. I didn't want it to burn through and activate the center too quickly, so I made smaller fires at the corners. I put them at all of them so it wouldn't be too slow. Asuma nodded. I figured that much, but were you visualizing anything when you drew the characters? Yeah. I can always see something when I think of a character. I usually think of things in terms of their characters. Like the QB. 9 and power look kind of similar. How does that work? And I can just tell the right way to make the chakra flow in the drawing by looking at it, and pushing up against it with my energy. It sounded weird, but there it was. Asuma smiled. That's very good, Naruto. I think you have the potential to become an excellent seal master. Naruto stared. He hadn't been expecting that. He made the tag work and all, but as he turned to look at its effects, he couldn't help but feel that it wasn't as large as it should have been. He felt his face heat a little, and he smiled in spite of his own critique. Dad thinks I can do even better. What I'm most curious about is what made you draw the square outside the circle. Naruto shrugged. I guess I just wanted something to connect everything to. A square seemed better than a circle since explosions are. He drew his hands apart. Right. They're radial. Now, the square you drew is called the matrix of the seal. It provides contact to multiple elements of the diagram. In simple seals like explosive tags, there's only one matrix, but in more complicated seals, there are usually multiple matrices, some that are even compressed into each other. So, like in my seal? He placed a hand over his stomach. He still had trouble believing that there was something so powerful locked inside him. And I never even knew it was there. The Yonde must have really been a seal genius. Your seal is heavily compressed. I only know a little bit about it, even with the extra training I received. It's actually two seals combined into one, overlapping to make a reinforcement. Naruto nodded slowly. One over the other. So if I take my hands and put them over each other. Your hands make a good analogy, HM? Asuma grinned. Naruto frowned. How do you always know when I'm thinking something like that? It really wasn't fair that his father was practically a mind reader sometimes. Asuma laughed. I could be rubbing off on you. Or it could be the other way around? Like I could ever influence Dad. How would I learn more about my seal? Jiraiya knows the most at this point. He has the seal key, and he has the greatest base of knowledge to draw on. Then I'd have to talk to him about it. He said it more to himself, and didn't bother to keep the reservation out of his voice. Asuma cleared his throat. He looked preoccupied again, and Naruto knew by now that meant something important was going through his mind. Naruto, how would you feel about leaving the temple for a while? Leave? He looked around reflexively. From where he stood he could see the mountains, the forests. The air always felt cool and fresh, and he'd never known any other home. But if he was with his father, would it matter? Dad's home is Konoha, but he's happy here. Where would we go? We'd be looking for someone. Depending on where she is, we could travel all across Fire Country. Naruto felt a spark of excitement. All over that map. They could actually go along the mountain paths, to the coast. He'd never seen the ocean. And he could see other people. Other shinobi. Maybe they could even see Konoha. Who are we looking for? Someone named Tsunade. She's one of the Sannin, like Jiraiya, though she's an expert in medical jutsu and combat. So she knows a lot about taijutsu? Maybe she'd teach me something. She's reputed to be unmatched in hand-to-hand combat. And according to what I've heard, she's quite proficient in sealing as well. That was enough to sell Naruto on the idea. When we find her, do you think she'll teach me? Asuma smiled. I knew that'd be enough to get your attention. If we do find her, and there's not guarantee we will, we'll have to try and convince her to even hear us out. She hasn't had any dealings with Konoha shinobi in years. Naruto wasn't deterred. But I'm not a Konoha shinobi. I just want to learn stuff. Why would she say no to that? Most likely she'll view you as an extension from me. Since you're my son, and I'm in turn the Hokage's son, and a member of the Guardian Ninja, convincing her that we're not there to pressure her into aiding Konoha won't be easy. You always say easy things aren't worth doing. Asuma laughed. I suppose I do. He placed his hands in his pockets and looked to the sky. Since you don't seem unhappy about the idea, we can be packed and ready to leave as soon as Jiraiya arrives and takes care of a few things. Naruto frowned. What kind of things? Anbu for one. Oh. Naruto still hadn't forgiven himself for his bout of fear and inability to tell a shinobi from the embellishments of his imagination. You mean he's going to make it so that they won't be able to find us? Not quite. But he'll make sure that we're not followed after we leave. Naruto walked closer to his father before stopping. Dad, how do you know we're not being watched right now? Asuma smirked. Give your father some credit. Why do you think I chose such a remote training ground? Naruto looked around. There weren't any trees or other hiding places close enough for someone to hear what they'd be saying, and the whole area was flat enough that they'd be able to see someone approaching from a long way off. And do you see those signs on the ground? Naruto nodded. They're silencing seals. I think I told you how sound moves through the air? Yeah. Well, the seals cause a thin wall of air to vibrate just in a way that cancels out the vibrations from your voice. But everyone has a different voice. How will you make sure that the seals will cancel out the sound of your voice? There's a range of the human voice. You can attune the seal to that range, and over a certain distance, The vibrations from your voice spread out in the same way regardless. The most anyone would be able to hear would be something like static from a radio. I guess I understand. Is this like what you wanted to teach me before? Well, you could say that the flow of heat in a metal is caused by vibrations too, but the structure that's vibrating isn't the same. An electrical flow is caused by a different mechanism. Naruto took another look at the silencing seals. I guess I should have known you'd have thought of something. Don't sound so unsure about that. Asuma actually managed to come across as offended, but the effect was ruined by his smile. Naruto imitated his father's posture of placing his hands in his pockets. He did that often, and he always looked so relaxed when he did it, even if there was something troubling him. Naruto wondered if he looked like that. Is Jiraiya going to be here today? He's already arrived, actually. How do he caught himself? A seal, right? My son is fast to pick things up. Naruto huffed. Is this like when you waved all those scrolls about tailed beasts in front of me and wanted me to figure it out for myself? Asuma paused. Not really. I'm just using these seals because they're useful. The one that let me know Jiraiya was here is a simple one that triggers when his chakra signature is close enough. He smiled again. But at least you're motivated now. You'd better teach me those seals. If I can show that Tsunade person I know some things, she'll probably want to teach me. And I won't be completely useless on the road. One thing at a time, Naruto. Yeah, I know. Are we going to go anywhere near Konoha? No, not yet. I don't have any business there now, and if we stop, I might get tangled up in things I'd rather avoid. Naruto just nodded. If his father's reasons affected him somehow, he would have said so. He instead focused on how he might be able to get Jiraiya to tell him more about his seal without actually asking outright. He'd left shortly after the examination, and Naruto thought he looked uncomfortable in the presence of him and his father. Dad said he was the Yondaime student, so maybe he feels guilty that he couldn't save him. Or maybe he thinks I'm to blame. But he'd never shown any hostility towards Naruto, just a kind of caution that didn't seem to have any precursor except for the danger of what his seal held back. But nothing has ever even happened with the Kyuubi. He said the seal was fine. He sighed, low so that his father wouldn't hear and become concerned. Naruto. So much for that. But he looked up and saw the source of his father's interruption, his face morphing from surprise to I really don't like it when he has that smile on his face. Well, I have to say it's impressive that you were able to use that trigger seal on me before I noticed it. My instruction didn't go to waste, I see. If he's coming with us, he stopped and stared. Is that a giant frog next to him? Is that frog real? He pointed without bothering to wait for his father to finish talking. Jiraiya's smile fell. It's a toad, you ignorant kid. He turned to Asuma. What have you been teaching him? Asuma hadn't taken his hands out of his pockets. How to blow up loud, ostentatious objects. Oh, so you've started him on sealing, eh? He made a tag explode. And he managed an explosive tag without any prior knowledge or experience. He smiled at Naruto. That's pretty impressive, even to someone like me. Humph. This coming from a guy who plays with frogs. Jiraiya. It's cool around here, so if you don't need me for anything else, I'm going to get back. It talked. Naruto couldn't help but jump back a little as the amphibian voiced its discomfort. Jiraiya laughed, and Naruto glared at him. Stupid old man. Even his father looked a little amused. The toad just blinked at him. You keep strange company now, Jiraiya. Very strange company. Jiraiya waved his hand. Go then. I need to do some scouting afterward anyway, and you're not exactly inconspicuous outside of a forest. The creature made what Naruto thought was a sound of irritation before turning and hopping towards the trees. Naruto stared after it. How will it get over the wall? Don't worry about him. He knows how to get around. Him? You can tell? Jiraiya frowned. Of course I can tell. Asuma, there's something seriously wrong with the boy if he can't tell male from female. It's a frog, Naruto protested. Toad. Toad. Not frog. Frogs need to stay in water or they'll desiccate. Toads can move around outside of water. Whatever. Naruto stepped forward and looked around, as though worried that he might be accosted by some other talking animal. So my father finally got around to sending you here. Yes, and he was fairly pushy about it, all things considered. At least he told me he sent the NBU. His letter said that much? He also mentioned you knew a few specifics that he couldn't mention. Naruto's interest peaked as Jiraiya nodded. That can wait until we're indoors. I've taken a few precautions against eavesdropping while you were off with Naruto. They walked the rest of the way without saying anything Naruto found interesting. Mostly his father asked about people in Konoha he'd never heard about, and Jiraiya's answer didn't seem out of the ordinary, so he took that to mean that things were fine. Coming upon the house, Naruto tried to find signs of Jiraiya's apparent precautions, but the walls and ground looked as ordinary as they always had. As usual, they entered the kitchen to have their discussion. Well, Jiraiya sat down without any poise. I can tell you that your father is liking being reinstated in office less and less with each passing month. Don't tell me that's all the information you have? Things with Suna are becoming less stable. They think we're conspiring against them, since they're still at a military disadvantage. They've always been at a military disadvantage. That's why they became so skilled at developing poisons. Poisons, now that sounds interesting. Naruto wanted to stop them and ask, but he resisted the urge. And what's Suna's accusation against us this time? They seem to think we're going to use Naruto as a weapon against them. What? He couldn't keep his silence now. Why would they think that? I thought Konoha didn't want any more wars. They don't, but remember I told you part of what keeps the balance is the threat of using Jinchuriki in battle. Asuma grimaced. I guess my little ruse went a bit far. It's not really that. It works on the populace. The problem is that their Jinchuriki is apparently unstable, to say the least, and they're worried it will put them at a disadvantage. Asuma frowned. Unstable how? I don't know yet. I haven't managed to dig that far. All I can say is that they don't know whether they can guarantee cooperation out of whoever the tailed beast has been sealed into, if things come down to combat. So my seal could start getting unstable too. And if that happened, Kyuubi would kill whoever was around me. He looked to Jiraiya. But he said everything with the seal was fine, and he seems to know what he's talking about. Don't worry, Naruto. You're in very good shape, mentally and physically, and your seal was designed by one of the best masters Konoha has ever produced. If Dad says so. That's why the NB were here, I assume. To make sure that Suna wouldn't try anything with Naruto. Jiraiya nodded. When you delivered your report to the daimyo regarding your suspicions about Suna's involvement, things seemed to fall together. But do they know that Naruto is here? Not from what we've been able to gather. It seems the incident involving information transfer was separate from that involving their Jinchuriki. So are we still going to be under surveillance? Your father seemed to indicate that he wanted to err for caution. He would. Asuma smiled, and Naruto was left confused. So they wanted to make sure that I wouldn't be taken by Suna? Or did they think that I wasn't stable? They claim it was for the first reason, but they probably used the time to convince themselves that you weren't a threat. And I haven't even done anything to anyone. Weird people. Asuma was twirling his cigarette again. Naruto hadn't seen him smoke one, just hold them like they comforted him somehow. Jiraiya, how would you feel about helping me out with a little ruse? Oh? My specialty is it? I'm listening. Naruto and I are going on a little reconnaissance mission, and I'd like to convince whatever ANBU might still be wandering around that we're still here after we've gone. That's definitely doable. And what kind of reconnaissance mission do you need a 5-year-old to complete? I'm going to try and find Tsunade. Whatever Jiraiya was expecting, it wasn't that, because he was struck silent before speaking. Tsunade? Why would you want to find her? Is someone close to you dying? Not quite. I'm interested in finding out where a precisely diluted stimulant might have come from, and what kind of skill you might need to do that. Also, he nodded to Naruto, who took it as a signal to stand at excited attention. I'm hoping she'll be able to teach Naruto a thing or two. I'm going to skip over what might be wrong with that sentiment for the time being. I don't know where she might be. I have a few theories, some intuition, but then if you'd asked me if she'd have up and left Konoha with barely a notice, I'd have bet all my money on no. He smirked. Though playing with her, I probably still would have won. Any information would be useful. Well, I'd start by looking in small, backwater places. She always had a penchant for helping obscure people in obscure places. And I'd also keep track of who goes to gambling houses. She's legendary in that circle. I'd heard that she liked to bet. And lose. She's known as a legendary sucker, though unless you want your jaw rearranged I wouldn't say that in front of her. Naruto frowned. She sounds weird. I'll keep that in mind, if I ever actually find her. What exactly made you decide to do this? It wasn't my idea. Chiriku suggested that I could turn it into a mission to test my theory on Suna. Since that's already been done, more or less, I don't have much left to do in that area. But I'm still curious as to where that poison came from, and I think Naruto could really benefit from traveling around a little. And I could learn a lot of stuff. He felt that needed to be emphasized. Don't get your hopes up for having Tsunade as a teacher, kid. She's standoffish even in the best of moods, and doesn't have much patience for those who can't keep up with her expectations, which are intentionally ridiculous. I can do it. Naruto held his head high. Humph. If you say so. How much progress has he made since I was last here anyway? His taijutsu has improved markedly. He knows how to conserve his energy, and deliver well-placed kicks and punches to sensitive areas of the body. His accuracy with kunai and shuriken is also excellent, even if his range still needs some work. I already mentioned I started him on sealing, and I planned on hitting you up for some reading on that before we left. As for his chakra control, he got over 3/4 of the way up the leaf before the chakra blade collapsed. He should have that done within the next few days, and then I'll have my work cut out for me. When Dad puts it like that, the last few months seem really small. He wouldn't let himself be discouraged. And what's your opinion on his sealing ability? Well, you're the expert, but from what I've seen. He looked at Naruto, and it seemed like he was silently saying don't let his go to your head. Naruto felt that spark of excitement in him again. With proper training, he might well join the list of Kohoha's other seal masters by the time he's in his 20s. You've seen his calligraphy. That's a first sign. And he has an intuition with the chakra flow and diagrams that's usually only present after some experience. It's not perfect, but the potential is there. Naruto just grinned, struggling not to burst out and jump on his father. Stay still. Show him that you're not like the frog guy. Well, that's not too surprising. And Tsunade is skilled, but he waved his hand. You can worry about that when the time comes. As for making sure you can slip away without being noticed, I have something that'll work perfectly. Asuma nodded. I'm listening. It's similar to the replacement technique, but on a much higher level. In theory, you can use an ordinary shadow clone and build up on that, but it's easier to use a medium, preferably organic, and some of the subject's blood. Blood used as opposed to molding the chakra to suit appearances? No. In this case, it adds stability. Using the blood will give the replacement greater longevity. You add the blood to the replacement medium, and mold your chakra in such a way that will make it assume the appearance of whatever subject you want. In this case, the replacements will look and sound like their counterparts, and have the same chakra signature. Why isn't this used more often in reconnaissance? Because it requires an extremely large amount of chakra. Getting the signature right means you have to use an amount equal to at least a third of your subject's regular amount. Since most shinobi conceal their chakra at least partially, I can use that minimum. Hey Dad, can you? No. One step at a time, Naruto. Leaf exercise first, then cloning techniques. Naruto huffed. Stupid leaf. Jiraiya sighed, shaking his head. This is a lot of trouble just so the two of you can run off on a grand tour of Fire Country. You're welcome to join, if you think it'll be that relaxing. Asuma spoke in a dry manner, but Naruto's head shot up. No. No frogs. Relax, Naruto. He turned to Jiraiya. It would be helpful if you could mark a few places on a map where we might have the best chance of finding her. Jiraiya nodded, retrieving a large map from his pack and spreading it on the table. With pen and ink, he started marking their initial route. You'll want to avoid the main routes as much as possible. She'll have taken a roundabout route regardless, and… As Naruto leaned forward, he couldn't help but remember the red marks of battles in the books his father had shown him. Paths carved with blood and steel. I'll make my own path. And it won't be by ripping people apart. He inhaled and felt the nervous excitement. Now the world had to prepare the entrance of Naruto Sarutobi. Dad, why do we only look in bars and places with gambling? Naruto regarded the mostly vacant room with curiosity. Because the person we're looking for is apparently trying to drown herself in debt and the liquid of her choice. Tsunade has a taste for that sort of thing. Oh? So like your cigarettes? Naruto nodded to himself, the situation apparently resolved in his eyes. Asuma winced a bit. I wouldn't put it quite like that, but the principles are similar. Almost all of the people in there are smoking. Naruto looked up at him. Do you drink, Dad? Not much. And not recently. Not since I learned that Kakashi is actually capable of holding his alcohol. Asuma broke out of this thought as the owner approached the counter. He looked first to Asuma, then to Naruto. He's a bit young to be going to these places, isn't he? He sounded pleasant, but Naruto frowned. Asuma headed him off. We're looking for someone. He placed the photograph on the counter. Have you seen this woman? The man took the picture in his fingers, examining it in silence before placing it back down. I can't say that I have. What's her name? Tsunade. I've heard a few customers mention that name, and always in the same breath as a few swears. Oh? Apparently she's managed to accumulate quite the gambling debt, and she's never very eager to repay them. Asuma nodded. Any idea where she might be now? The man laughed. If anyone knew that, she'd have an angry crowd on her heels wherever she went. And yet no one's bothered to look for her. Did anyone ever describe her? Not that I remember. All I've ever heard is people complain of a woman who lost and refused to pay her debts. Asuma took the picture back. When was the last time you heard anyone mention her? Weeks ago. She made a large wager, lost, and left before anyone could try to collect. He sighed. Thank you for your time. He nodded. Naruto. His son had wandered off and was currently looking on with fascination as a new calligraphy scroll was being painted and placed on the wall, the writing using a cursive script which Naruto had himself never seen. Asuma smiled as he brought Naruto to his side, knowing what he'd be asked to demonstrate once they returned to their room. He'd be eager to leave anyway. Just 3 days into their journey, and he managed to slice the leaf cleanly in half, duplicating the feat twice in succession before Asuma had announced that he'd passed the test. Since then, he'd been practicing and mastering seal formations, running through the bare hand motions without any assistance, though he had yet to try any just some more complicated than a henge. If his chakra didn't have so much inertia, he could mold it much more rapidly, and his seal speed would be right where it should be. Naruto had asked if the stupid fox was to blame for his troubles, and while Asuma suspected that that was a part of it, Naruto's own large reserves were also dragging him down. He looked at Naruto and saw that he was going through all the formations in no particular order, muttering to himself as he did so. I should do something about the absent-mindedness. And the talking to himself. Maybe if we run into some children on the way, that would be good for him. Seeming to sense his father's scrutiny, Naruto stopped his ministrations and looked slightly abashed. He rubbed the back of his neck as he always did when he felt nervous. After a few seconds he returned to normal. Hey, if this lady is so famous, why doesn't anyone know what she looks like? She's either using an illusion on herself, or she's placing the people she meets under some kind of genjutsu so they'll only have a vague recollection of her. I'm hoping it's the latter, and judging by what we just heard, I'm willing to say it is. Naruto nodded. Why does she bet all that money if she can't even pay it back? She's just making a lot of people mad at her. She has a problem. Or she's intentionally making sure that she can't stay in any one place for too long. Maybe she's afraid of getting too comfortable. Oh. Then we'll have a really hard time finding her, won't we? This is only the second town we've looked into, so I wouldn't worry right now. And we still haven't seen the medic. Naruto's stomach growled loudly before he could respond to that. Asuma chuckled. Although it looks like we'll be stopping to eat before then. What are you in the mood for? Could we get fried pork? Sure. We passed a place on the way here. Naruto smiled. Did you remember I like that and look out for a place? That I did. They entered the restaurant, and Asuma was reminded it was past noon as he saw many of the tables were taken and the smell of meat and spice hung heavily in the air, almost giving it a heat of its own. Naruto sat down and eagerly looked over the menu, motioning Asuma over. He noticed there were couples with children. Mom, I don't want to have the soup. Why do I have to? Because it's good for you and easy to digest. Great explanation. Asuma slid into the seat across from Naruto, watching his face for any change of expression, but it remained as animated as when they'd first entered. Where are we going after we leave this town? We'll be following the path north. I was planning on stopping at all the towns along that road, but since she hasn't been here in several weeks, I think we'll skip the very next one. Naruto nodded as they were brought cups of tea. He'd acquired a taste for it while at the temple, though nothing had as of yet taken the place of milk on his list of favorite beverages. That makes sense. He sipped his drink for a few seconds. Who's the other Sannin? I know Tsunade and Jiraiya, but I don't think you told me the other one. Orochimaru. He said the name without hesitation and without cringing on the syllables. Ikibi said it best. Something not human that just happened to take human form. After that, you just accept it and hope you can hold yourself together if you ever have to face it. That's a funny name. Naruto frowned in concentration. He must be visualizing the characters and what they mean. Asuma kept his cup close to his face in case his expression slipped. Why doesn't anyone talk about him? What's he doing? He defected from Konoha. He's a missing nin. Naruto's eyes widened and he leaned forward. What did he do? Asuma cleared his throat and looked around. All civilians, as far he could tell, and every one of them seemed to be too engrossed in their food and conversation to pay them any attention, the nearest group a table away. He was accused of performing human experiments on Konoha shinobi. The third Hokage, your grandfather, discovered what he was doing and tried to stop him, but he couldn't bring himself to kill him. He was like a son to me. He tensed almost by reflex. I wasn't even planned, but my brother decided that he had no desire to be a shinobi. And Orochimaru went crazy. Had father invested too much of himself in his student at that point? Dad? Naruto looked up, concern overriding his curiosity. Asuma blinked. I'm sorry, Naruto. I was just distracted. I was saying, the third tried to stop him, but he didn't kill him. He kept eye contact with Naruto. His face was so innocent. His hands were still soft and free of calluses. He's never even raised his hand against an enemy. He swallowed heavily. If he ever followed down that kind of path, wouldn't I be just as powerless to stop him? But I thought the Hokage was supposed to be the strongest ninja in the village. Was it that he didn't want to kill him? Trust Naruto to pinpoint the differences in particular words. That's right. Orochimaru was his student, so he hesitated, and that allowed him to escape. His student grandfather trained all three of them, right? Asuma nodded. In his youth, he was called the professor because he was so skilled and knowledgeable of ninja techniques. He took another drink. Even now, that name is still well deserved. Naruto nodded, processing what he'd just been told. In the meantime, their orders arrived, and it took a few moments for him to realize what had been placed before him. They ate in silence for a time, before Naruto could put together more questions. What made Orochimaru decide to leave the village? Couldn't he learn enough there? Not enough to satisfy himself. From what your grandfather told me, he wanted to extend his life so he could learn every ninja technique. Naruto stopped eating, the food hovering a few inches from his mouth before he set the utensils down. Oh. He rubbed the back of his neck. I guess is that really so bad? He hesitated at the last statement, looking to Asuma for some kind of confirmation. In principle, no. Wanting to learn more is only natural, and some shinobi devote their lives to it. But you have to remember, Naruto, that everything has its limits. Naruto nodded, indicating that he understood, or at least that he wanted his father to continue his explanation. What Orochimaru was doing was throwing away the lives of others in order to further his own goals. He had no regard for their lives or the lives of anyone else. So he couldn't be happy with just how much time he had in his own life, and he wanted more? Is that what you mean? Yes. He chewed while he thought. We all have a certain amount of time to do things. Have a family. Be a shinobi. Learn techniques. Whatever we want to do with our lives, we can't do it forever. I sound like Chirika now, but if he was able to drill it into my head, Naruto shouldn't have too much of a problem. But we can live on in what we do, in the memories of those who come after us, even if we're not physically alive. Naruto smiled. Like the names of the dead monks in the fire temple. Asuma nodded. When I take you to Konoha, you'll see the mountainside where the faces of the Hokages are carved. The first and the second have been dead for a long time, but we still remember them, and their names. Grandfather's face is there too, right? Yes. And so is the fourth's. Though we all still remember his face of flesh and blood better than of stone. What was he like? The fourth? Asuma smiled. His name was Minato. I only really got to know him about 2 years before he died. He'd speak to my father often, and I was impressed by him. He was a great ninja, right? Naruto's face held the kind of excitement, pure and unabashed, that only a child could bring to bear. He was, but that wasn't the reason I tried to get to know him. Odd as it sounds, selfish as it sounds, I was drawn to him because he paid attention to me. Naruto looked puzzled. Didn't grandfather pay attention to you? He did, and so did my mother. My childhood wasn't unhappy by any means. Even if the attention did seem formalized. Minato, though, he treated me like one of his students, and he regarded his students as equals. He was older than me, stronger than me, smarter than me, more skilled than me, but that never seemed to matter. Did he teach you anything? Asuma chuckled. Always going after techniques, Naruto? His son looked embarrassed, especially after the previous conversation. It's all right, Naruto. Every young person is eager to learn. He was never my teacher in a formal sense, but he was always willing to help whoever came to him. He helped me with my wind affinity, since he was one of the few Konoha shinobi with that element. Naruto looked impressed. The fourth taught you and now you might be teaching me wind release. He grinned. That's really cool. HM. He finished off the rest of his drink, and leaned back. Naruto returned to his food, eating with his usual enthusiasm. He doesn't even seem to be resentful towards Minato for the QB. But then he's never been exposed to anyone who considers him a manifestation of the demon instead of just its container. Asuma exhaled. I told him that he was Konoha's hero for being the container. That's what you wanted, wasn't it, Minato? What did the fourth look like? I saw pictures of the others, but not him. Look in the mirror. And add a decade or two. HM? You and Minato look very much alike. You have the same hair and eyes. He figured the QB out. If I nudge him in the right direction, he should get this too. Naruto touched his hair as though its texture had suddenly changed. Asuma suspected that if there had been a reflective surface nearby, Naruto would have rushed to it to examine his face and eyes. Do you have a picture of him? Not on me, but I can show you one once we're back at the hotel. Naruto just nodded, a frown of concentration on his face, his hands placed in his lap. Asuma was sure he also kicked his legs in and out. He turned back to his soup and drank it slowly. He didn't see a point in rushing. They wouldn't be leaving today anyway, and the town was a dead end, as far as finding Tsunade was concerned. The attendant drifted by and offered more tea, which Asuma accepted, and as he left, two entered the restaurant, both wearing flak jackets and Konoha forehead protectors. Asuma closed his eyes, sighing. So much for a relaxing lunch. He let his eyes drop to his bowl, keeping the shinobi in his peripheral vision as they took a table across from theirs. He saw a black and red fan symbol sewn onto the shirt sleeve of what looked to be the younger of the two. And an Uchiha to boot. Knowing our luck, they'll be from an information squad. But those usually have a Hyuga thrown in for good measure. His eyes narrowed as he looked more closely at the man facing their table, only to widen in recognition a moment later. Genma. He said the name in a voice so low he could barely hear himself. Wonderful. He looked across the table at Naruto, who was again eating in silence, apparently lost in his musings. If he'd brought Naruto's attention to the Genma and the other, it wouldn't do much good. He glanced up. They were still apparently being ignored. But Genma was always observant, and Dad didn't mention anything about giving orders to have other shinobi ignore us. Then he doesn't actually know that we're wandering around. Dad, what's wrong? Naruto had apparently had enough of contemplation. Asuma said. Two Konoha shinobi sitting at the table at your 8 o'clock. Naruto stilled. He knew enough not to turn around and look, so he settled for taking his father's word. He mouthed, Do you know them? Asuma had a pen at the ready and scribbled a brief note. One of them. The brown-haired one. We've worked together, and he's a friend of mine. Naruto frowned, replying quickly. Asuma winced when he saw the writing. Even in a rush, his handwriting looked like scribbles compared to his son's. Then why are we being so cautious? It's good practice. And I'm enjoying myself. I don't feel like being bothered right now. His response made Naruto roll his eyes. He crushed the paper in his hand, placing it in his pocket for what Asuma assumed would be later, proper disposal. At the other table, Genma had made himself comfortable in his chair, sinking lower than the others and letting his legs stretch out. The Uchiha had his back straight, but he otherwise sat just like any other patron would. He can't be older than 13. Maybe 14. Has Genma been made a teacher? The thought seemed absurd, like having Kakashi be a teacher. And he's too young anyway. Asuma lowered his head again, trying to concentrate on what was being said at the table, but with everyone else talking, it was difficult for him to pick up anything specific. He heard Naruto clear his throat and looked up. I can hear what they're saying. He was mouthing again. Asuma frowned. Is my hearing that bad already? He shook his head slowly, indicating that Naruto shouldn't speak. Continuing in silence would be even more conspicuous at this point. Naruto cleared his throat. So what do you think of the food here? Asuma smiled a bit. He was good at being silent, but his conversation skills could use some work. It's good, thought it could use a bit more variety. If Ginma hasn't noticed us by now, they should send him back to the academy for stealth training. Naruto was quiet for a moment before pulling out his own paper. I guess, but I still like it. He pushed it across. Sure Sway. Do you know that name? Asuma thought for a moment. The Uchiha seemed to manufacture talent, so recalling one out the bunch would be difficult. He made the connection. If Ginma is a teacher now, he must have more talent than I gave him credit for. Before he could push the paper back, he saw Ginma rise from his chair with exaggerated difficulty. He walked over slowly, his hands in his pockets. And he still has that stupid stick in his mouth. He should just start smoking like a normal man. You know, it's considered rude in most circles to ignore a friend when you see him. He spoke with a smile on his face. It's also considered rude to interrupt someone's lunch without being invited first. Ginma shrugged, looking over at Naruto. And is this? I'm Naruto. He supplied in a neutral tone. Ginma nodded, seemingly nonplussed. Asuma looked around. No one else was looking at them, but not looking didn't imply not listening. Ginma, if you want to have a conversation with me, I'd suggest another time and place. I have a fairly busy schedule today. I suppose you're right. The senbon in his mouth pointed upward as he considered. Would you like to continue this conversation when we see each other next time? Only so I can make you promise not to go babbling about this to my father the moment you set foot in Konoha. And leaving town doesn't guarantee that we won't be followed. It'd be nice to catch up with an old friend. He scribbled the name of the hotel and room and made sure Ginma could see it. Well, I guess I'll see you around. It was nice running into you. He sighed. Hopefully next time you'll be less occupied. He inclined his head towards Naruto. It was nice meeting you. Asuma exhaled as soon as Ginma had turned his back. If I'd actually needed to get out of here without being noticed, maybe it couldn't have been helped. That was weird, Naruto muttered. Ginma's all right. As long as you don't expect him to take you seriously to your face. Is he like the frog guy? He laughed. Not at all. He's more subtle in public, and doesn't take himself nearly as seriously. Naruto seemed happy. That'll be nice. He paused. Are we going back to the room? Asuma nodded. They finished eating, paid the bill and left without any incident, either of them looking at the table on the way out. They walked a few blocks before speaking, Naruto doing a good job of containing his questions as they went. He told him numerous times that he should always appear calm, even when he wasn't. Are you going to talk to that guy later? He'll come to our room when he's ready. What if he's NBU? If he is, he's already seen us, and it doesn't really matter whether we agree to meet with him or not. We could leave. We could, but then he'd have a reason to follow us. So who's that Shursui guy? He's an Uchiha, and a very talented one at that. Even at a young age, he stood out. Naruto perked up. Do you think I could meet him? I've read about the Uchihas. Their Sharingan sounds really interesting. I guess I could ask Ginma, although the fewer people who know we're here, the better. But they already know we're here. I won't tell him anything I'm not supposed to. Naruto was practically bouncing as he walked. I'll ask Ginma, I promise. And to think some parents can't resist their child's face. I can't say no to my son's enthusiasm. Naruto smiled and nodded, the bounce remaining in his step as they arrived at the hotel. Asuma had chosen it because the sloping roof reminded him of the buildings in the fire temple, and the clean exterior indicated it had been recently built. Imagine what they could do if Tsunade ever paid back her debts. Naruto ran ahead of him on the stairs, waiting impatiently by the door as Asuma walked. He should have attended the academy. The teachers would have loved a diligent student. Dad, where did you put the scroll about the clans in Konoha? Asuma opened the door and let him in. I arranged all the storage scrolls by topic. It should be under people and customs. All right. Thanks. Asuma sank into a chair and watched his son search. The room was simple, just 2 beds a few feet apart with a table and a few places to sit. Green and blue sheets. A polished wood floor. Bamboo, by the looks of it. I can't guarantee that you'll be able to talk to him, Naruto. I know. I'm getting ready in case I can. He'd found the scroll, unsealed it, and started reading what he wanted. Asuma stood and found his own scroll, his own notes on an old project. He unfurled the paper, Properties of Chakra Conductors. That title really looks poor when I compare it to his writing. Maybe when he gets older, I'll dictate things to him. He continued reading. Chakra metal tends to be very hard, thought it's more brittle than high carbon steel, for example. Maybe increase heat treatment and increase time between quenching? He leaned back. Not that it matters, when I use wind nature with the blades. But if I could slice cleanly through shuriken, I'd know I've made progress. And when Naruto makes more progress with sealing and ninjutsu, I can start him on metallurgy. A tapping at the window made him look up. Genma looked in, waving with an exaggerated smile. He really needs to take up smoking instead of that stick. I thought you actually wanted to eat at that restaurant. What are you doing here already? Genma jumped in, causing Naruto to give him an irritated look as his scrolls were disturbed. I'm beginning to think you don't want me as your friend, Asuma. He looked at Naruto. He's talkative, isn't he? He doesn't like it when someone interrupts his studies. Genma only nodded. And you're Naruto, if I remember. Yeah. Naruto glanced up briefly, as politeness dictated. And you're Genma. Nice to see you again, I guess. Then his attention was back to his reading. Charming! He sat at the foot of Asuma's bed. Genma, what are you doing here? Well, I came to see you. I thought we'd established that already. You know what I mean. I'm returning from a mission. I didn't come looking for you, Asuma. I thought you were at the fire temple, like a guardian should be. I'm on a mission myself. With a 5-year-old. He threw out a guess. I'm 5.5. Naruto looked indignant. Genma smiled. My apologies. I wasn't going to leave my son alone for that long. Genma looked surprised. Your son? He nodded, looking towards Naruto. You knew about it before, Genma. You helped look over my house before I left, after all. Is that because I'm a Jinchuriki? Naruto looked up again. Genma was again caught off guard. Ah, yes. Although I was learning myself at that point. There were older, more experienced shinobi doing most of the patrolling. Oh. So you're not Anbyu, are you? He smiled. If I was, I wouldn't tell you, would I? Naruto frowned. No, I guess not. You've told him a lot, huh? Actually, he figured most of it out on his own. I just gave him a nudge in the right direction. More like a shove, Naruto